Sarah, can you hear me?
So thanks everybody for coming
Hello?
tonight. We're still trying to get our attorney online, so it will be a minute before we get started this evening.
Sarah? Can you hear me?
Michael? Oh. Did you hang up?
Yes, Sarah, can you hear me?
Uh,
No?
We're getting it there. We can see you talking, but we can't hear it.
Oh,
So we're hitting some volume buttons on our end.
oh. Michael, can we do a test again? Ugh, I'm really loud.
sure. You can try a test.
Mm.
Want me to call back?
Not yet. Just stay where you are.
We got you online, which is half the battle today.
Okay, sorry for the inconvenience.
Yeah, that's the max volume on that. So I'm checking Jen to see. We have the process, right? It's just the.
Sarah, can you hear me? Hello, Sarah? Hello, Sarah?
Can you hang up on the computer
Yes.
or mute or whatever, however that works?
Okay, I just muted one. Hang on a minute. Okay, I can still hear you. I think we eliminated the downlink echo.
Okay, yeah, now we have you much louder in the assembly chambers.
Okay, great, thank you.
Perfect. I think this is going to work for us. All right, Sarah, we're good to go on your side then? Perfect. Thank you much for getting us all connected. I appreciate it. So I'll go ahead and call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. Please join me for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Present.
Mr. Mosher,
Here.
Mr. Pike,
Here.
Mr. Yestad,
Here.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Ms. Carlson. Here. And Mr. Celine.
Here. Any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? Seeing none, there are no ceremony matters that'll bring us to special reports. We do have a scheduled special report this evening. Joe will give us an update on the Sitka Airport Terminal project. Welcome. All right, now let's see if this works. 'Tis the season for technical difficulties.
It's working on my end. I think you got to hit share on your end. I hit screen share and then you hit share content. Thank you, Sarah. All right, thanks everyone for your time. I appreciate it. My name is Joseph Bay. I'm the airport terminal manager for the city and borough of Sitka. Here to give you a quick update on the Sitka Rocky Gutierrez Airport Terminal Improvement Project. Good news is it is on schedule and on budget. So currently the team has used 4.9 million of, which is about 1/3 of the guaranteed maximum price of 14.9. Construction has reached about 30%. So you can see there on the left-hand side of your screen, 30%, 33% of the funds have been spent and about 30% of the construction has been completed. Cost performance index is 1, indicating the project is performing on budget, and the scheduled performance index is 1.11, indicating that the project is slightly ahead of schedule, but the SPI is skewed due to billings for early procurement and stored material. Our escalator just arrived on site, and that's a $400,000 piece of equipment, and we're preparing to install that. So we've got a lot of equipment stored on site, and that's why it's leaning a little bit towards ahead of schedule. Significant milestones include the installation of the underground electrical, stormwater, sewer, and water mains. A lot of the underground has been completed. Yeah, you're looking at 95%. Most of the utilities are underground and looking good. Earthworks and foundations have been substantially completed with only the slabs on the first and second floors of the addition to be poured, which will allow the installation of the escalator. Temporary structures are being constructed and to facilitate ongoing air carrier operations throughout phase 1B of the construction. Temporary baggage tunnel through the Nugget Restaurant was expedited at the owner's request to minimize closures during the peak season. Yeah, to give you a quick rundown, those construction item statuses, those are the important milestones, and you can see that we're making good progress on most of those. Moving right along. So to go over the schedule, this is a pretty good indication of how the project is tracking these different items as we go along. We are seeing that these items in blue have been completed. The project is about 1 week behind, with time being made up in the erection of the steel framing. The water main tie-in presented a challenge early last month, which did result in a delay. The team had concerns that the water main would fail during the tie-in due to the age of the main and the previous breaks. I think it was about 65 years old, and there were 3 previous breaks in this line. Because of the depth of the main, it's about 20 feet down, and the importance of the infrastructure serving the Coast Guard base, the project team coordinated with CBS and the DOT and PF to put emergency project funding in place and stage the necessary equipment to perform the repairs in the event the main failed. The CMAR was primed to address any system failures, and the DOT and PF would reimburse any costs associated with the required repairs. While the coordination did result in a delay, the tie-in was successful and all of the valves and the water lines functioned without issue. Big thank you to Rob, Joe, and Shiloh down at the water department for the support. Upcoming milestones, we are working on getting that escalator installed. So before we can do that, we are going to pour concrete slabs on the first and second floors of the addition to prepare for the escalator. Pan decking is nearing completion with the insulated metal walls and roof panels being prepared for installation. They are in town. We're shaking those out currently. Temporary Alaska Airline ticketing office trailer has been positioned in front of the terminal building to allow for ongoing airline operations as demolition begins on the southwest side of the terminal building. Current Alaska Airlines jet bridge will be decommissioned over the next few weeks to facilitate demolition and construction of the jetway and ramp leading to baggage claim. As mentioned previously during the airport update, I want to say back in the previous fall, this construction will necessitate ground boarding over the next 10 months. Enplanement and deplaning will be conducted through stairs and ramps. CBS requires Alaska and Delta Airlines to acquire, maintain, and provide ADA-compliant enplanement and deplaning equipment, which will be made available throughout these temporary operations. Temporary bag tunnel and bag makeup units are being erected right now. All right, so to get into some of the potential challenges, coordination with the airlines for airline ticketing office, striping, temporary baggage operations, and ground loading operations has been an ongoing challenge. Both airlines have required significant support from CBS, design, construction, and construction management teams. The construction management team is providing additional support to the airlines from Vanessa and Matthew with Avair Pros to coordinate operations, making sure that the airlines are responding and receiving all correspondences in preparation for the phase transition into 1B. The CMAR, DOT, and PF and CBS have been able to successfully address operational challenges. And I want to say a big thank you to Dan, Jenny, and Riddick for their exceptional work helping coordinate that. Decommissioning of the jet bridge is what's currently setting our schedule this month. Alaska Airlines is decommissioning their jet bridge in Juneau, which is pushing our target date from the 15th this week over to the 22nd, so we can come in, bring that team in for the decommission of Sitka's jet bridge. We are going to be moving, and what this kind of demonstrates is that 737 is going to be pushed back, and we are going to be changing 30-year-old operations, which is going to elevate the risk. The fencing, which you can see there dotted orange, is going to be erected around the jet bridge, and it's going to push the 737 beyond the secure identification display area, requiring coordination between the DOT, the TSA, and statewide aviation for the duration of the temporary aircraft parking 1. Decommissioning will take about 2 weeks. We're going to chop up that jet bridge with torches and then pick each section with a crane on site. And after those 2 weeks have gone by and we're able to successfully decommission the jet bridge, we are going to push that aircraft forward back within the side area into aircraft parking, temporary aircraft parking number 2. Clearance between the air cargo plane, which you see here, and the passenger 737 must be maintained to allow that cargo plane to be able to power out of that position. And what that allows us to do is prevent damage to the pavement from the heavy equipment that Alaska Airlines operates. This phasing diagram was provided by the design team to the airlines to help them train their staff for the temporary operations. Both Delta and Alaska have required these for their operations, and we have received approval for the Delta airline plane just coming past out of that side area. And just to reiterate to everyone, we are going to be decommissioning the jet bridge. That is going to necessitate ground boarding for the next 10 months, so please wear appropriate footwear because you will be walking out of the terminal building, across the airfield, and onto the plane. The remaining project schedule will see a continuation of the work on the addition and the remodel of the airfield side of the terminal building. Project funding of the Phase 1B has been submitted to the FAA and is expected to be executed this month. Temporary structures are being erected with the jet bridge setting the schedule on capture of the airfield side of the terminal for demolition. August should see the finalization of the Phase 2 design package and finalization of the Phase 2 GMP, the guaranteed maximum price. Significant completion of the addition is targeted for early 2025 with the completion of the remodel of the airfield side of the existing terminal building in spring. And that's when we should open up the addition and be utilizing that for flights going on out of here. Addition is expected to be completed and operational by May 2025. This will move us into Phase 2 of the remodel, which remodels the existing terminal building with targeted completion date 1 year after that in the spring of 2026. that pretty much wraps up the update for the terminal improvement project. Is there any questions?
John, please.
I just want to make a really quick comment. Joe, thank you for the update. I don't know if you were the one that put the earned value metrics together or if that was part of the team, but I want to thank you for that. That kind of spoke to me there because cost, quality, and schedule are three things that we want to track. And, you know, I've used earned value in the past, but hearing a cost and schedule performance indicator to tell us whether or not we're on cost and schedule is a big deal because, as you know, you can find out well early into the project if you're going to run over cost or if you're going to get off schedule. So hearing those numbers is great. And you or whoever was on the team that put it together, thank you very much for that.
So I have to credit Riddick. He's been doing an exceptional job of coming up with those earned value. And yeah, I will say that having those is being tracked very diligently, and each month has their own separate report. So if you would like any more information on the finances of the project, I'd be happy to send those to you.
Thank you. And then just one thing from me for nostalgia purposes, you know, we don't want to completely get rid of all of our old airport. Are we going to keep that massively loud and awkward baggage alarm? Because I think we have to. You know, the old yellowed jet bridge is one thing, but we've got to keep that alarm.
I understand that we are replacing our baggage system. I don't know if I'll be able to hold on to that klaxon and continue its use in parallel to the incoming unit. I will see if I can hold on to that.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate your presentation today.
Thank you all very much.
One more humorous question. There is a 20-minute guarantee on baggage for a primary carrier in this town. Have they been able to confirm that with these updates?
I know Alaska does a great job out there. They're hardworking folks, and I know that they're always going to make sure that you guys get your connecting flights and that you're getting your bags. That they don't want to pay if the bag's late, the fee. So they're on top of it, and they're going to keep moving fast.
Thank you.
All right, moving on in our agenda tonight. Is there anyone here under special reports for government to government? Municipal boards, commissions, committees? Municipal departments? School district? Students and guests for special reports? Seeing none, that'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Hi, I'm Claudia Lassesse, speaking as president of Small Town Soul, and this is Pete Hagan, vice president. And we are speaking on an item off the agenda.
We're here to inform the Assembly about the status of our effort to bring the volume of cruise visitation to a vote to the people of Sitka, and to make a special request of the Assembly members. As you know, there have been 3 attempts to begin circulating an official petition, and that we have retained an attorney to help us with the initiative language. The first attempt through land use zoning, which the city attorney said was an inappropriate approach for an initiative. The 2 other attempts would have created a tourism chapter in the general code. The third responded to comments by Sitka's former city attorney, plus an outside attorney who is now serving the city, who provided additional input leading to the municipal denial of these applications to petition. We are currently working with our attorney on a 4th application that will address those comments.
Our request is that 2 city assembly members sponsor a discuss, deliberate, decide item for the next assembly agenda. The purpose of the item would be to direct the city's attorney to work with our attorney to arrive at an initiative language that passes the city's legal tests. There is a provision in the general code for doing this, and it has been used previously for at least 1 initiative measure. General Code Section 2.8.040 governs initiatives. The second sentence in subsection A says, quote, "The assembly may direct the municipal attorney to assist in the wording of the petition," end quote. We believe that assembly providing such direction will make the process of getting our initiative on the ballot less time-consuming and less costly for both the clerk's office and the city attorney in the long run. Our hope is that you agree that getting this question on your next agenda is worthwhile. Either way, we will do whatever it takes to bring the critical issue of cruise tourism numbers to a vote of the citizens, and we truly wish to work with the city to keep the cost of this process as low as possible. We appreciate Mr. Gaudi's positive feedback on the third initiative and really hope that our two attorneys can work together to come up with good language for the initiative that we're going to be coming up with next. Thank you for your consideration of this request.
Good evening, Assembly. My name is Richard Ween. One of the key questions that Joe didn't allude to as far as the airport goes will be, how will this all affect my view on Sunday while eating breakfast at the Nugget, which to me is very important because that's half of the reason I go for their pancakes. But that's besides the point. We live here on an island paradise in the North Atlantic, which is fully dependent upon fossil fuels, fully. On Monday, I get out and mingle these days with the tourists. Sitka was a wild and crazy place. We had maximum, I think, 8,900 tourists. The e-bikes were zipping all over like swarms of cicada. I guess those are what are swarming down south, and buses and cars and the traffic and a lot of wonderful Disneyland crossers of the street. So it made the entire thing very interesting because this is all fuel-based. And the same thing is true for the airport. I see 3 jets there, and I've noticed an enormous increase in aircraft traffic. But the bottom line is fossil fuels, and I love them. I love jet A1, its smell. I love gasoline and octane. I love, in the old days when I'd be in my Porsche and be actually in West Virginia in the fall and driving those curvy highways and gassing it. And kids today won't know that. But the important thing is gasoline is a very high capacity fuel, which delivers 45 megajoules per kilogram. Of interest is lithium battery only delivers 0.5 megajoules per kilogram. So the bottom line is it won't be. You can deny all the initiatives, you can do this, you can do that, but it's going to be the externals to Sitka, even though people here think we're immune to it. I'm sure you were checking the final Q1 GDP print, which shows a sharp decline in consumer spending. And these are the things that are going to affect us, the price of fuel, et cetera. So you can definitely deny initiatives all you want, but it's going to happen. But nothing screams subsistence town than being able to buy a Rolex.
Good afternoon. My name is Austin Cranford. I wanted to address the petition that the city denied on Tuesday regarding the cap on tourism. I am not here to argue for or against the petition, but to discuss the process and how it was conducted. To start, the response from GDO mentions that stakeholders attempted to use Sitka General Code 280 to stop the petition, citing the past 2 petition attempts. This section prevents the petition from being resubmitted for up to 1 year. While GDO rebuked this attempt, it raises a significant concern that this code is extremely vague about how and when it applies. Meanwhile, I will also argue that this section has no basis in law and might violate the Supremacy Clause in Article 6 of the Constitution. The First Amendment of the Constitution protects the right to freedom of speech and religion. However, it also protects the right of the people to assemble and petition the government. Meanwhile, the Alaska State Constitution, under Article 1, Section 6, states the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government shall never be abridged. Lastly, after reviewing state laws, I found no section that prohibited people from submitting petitions, only laws that outline the process and time limits. Therefore, I strongly recommend that the Assembly take action to either update the law or remove it entirely. While this was probably not the intention behind the stakeholders' letters, it reads and seems like an attempt to violate citizens' rights. Next on the list, the city and GDO as an extension have a habit of using the reason of, quote, the proposed ordinance contains confusing, misleading, and incomplete provisions, unquote, as their catch-all term to reject petitions. This reason was used to deny the previous 2 petitions from the same group, and 2 I attempted to have accepted earlier this year for a total of 5 petitions currently. While this letter specifies the parts in violation, I am interested in seeing if this reason is used again, since the group already said they would prepare a 4th petition. Finally, last on our list, stakeholders in GDO cited constitutional challenges to the petition. I would like to remind the city that the courts hold the sole authority of constitutional interpretation, not themselves and not law forms. As such, these issues should play out in court if it comes to that. Ultimately, I would like to see the city support petitions more broadly. If the petition is the will of the people, it will pass. If not, it will fail. Every time a petition is denied, you send the message that the citizenry themselves cannot be trusted and that the city knows best. With that being said, Juneau, as of yesterday, according to the Sentinel, put a vote for ship-free Saturdays. And as requested by the group, they've requested the Assembly direct the city attorney to assist them. So I would like to see the Assembly also support that initiative. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Eisenbeiss, members of the Assembly. My name is Joel Hansen. I hope you received the materials that I sent by email yesterday with some information on the progress of the Jarvis Street Community Garden. It's been quite a while since I visited you up here to discuss the garden. Actually, the Assembly voted unanimously way back in September 12th of last year to support the proposal and or at least support the city's going ahead with the development of an RFP for reviewing the proposal. And I last gave you an update back in November, so it's been quite a while. I apologize it's been so long, but I'm trying to make a correction for it here. We have been busy. I recently had an opportunity to visit with Administrator Leach and with Amy Ainsley of the Department of Planning and Community Development on trying to get the RFP process going, and I've been assured that it's probably going to happen fairly soon. Hopefully, it's been difficult because the department has been understaffed and overworked. So I have nothing but respect for the planning department. They've done a great job, and Amy has been really good at coordinating, or at least in hearing me on a regular basis, coming and visiting her and finding out what the status of the project is. But we've been using our time to reach out and get program funding, project funding. We've received some grants from the Alaska Community Foundation. We received some money from from the Sitka Permanent Charitable Trust. We just found out today that the Rasmussen Foundation has reopened their granting program, and I'm in communication now with one of their grant officers. So things are moving along. We appreciate the support in the past, and we hope we'll continue to support this project in the future. We have a long list of people who have expressed their interest in the project. We have a lot of volunteers who want to help with the project once the project reaches its final stages. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Assembly and Mayor. I'm Rachel Roy. I'm the Director of the Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to just talk about a couple things that the Chamber's been up to and also recognize some of the city staff that have been supportive. We just came off a really incredible 4th of July. The parade had more entries than we've had in my entire time at the Chamber, so 10 years. And, you know, we do that in support with, and in collaboration with the police department, as well as the fire department participating in that. And so I really appreciate that support. We also just hosted, it just finished on my way over here just before this, but it was Business and Boats, and we were able to have an after, like a networking event, but utilizing one of the harbors. So I think just the willingness for your city staff, I don't know if they get recognized quite enough. So I wanted to thank you for that, to really step up. The other thing is that one of the initiatives of the Chamber is Sitka's Emerging Leaders. And it is one of your nonprofit grant funded programs. And we are going to be one of our monthly meetups is happening next week. And that is out at the golf course. It's an opportunity for people to get together and create connection within that workforce that maybe hasn't found that and that are newer to the workforce. And we have just set a date for an Emerging Leaders Summit, which will be October 3rd and 4th. And that will be a day and a half of really creating opportunity and connection around the topics that we're looking at. Personal finances comes up, but career development and creating space for looking at ways to keep our workforce here in the community. That is happening. We're also have our other initiative this year is around housing, and we are going to be looking and tackling the topic of high density housing. We've set our first meeting to have that group get together. And I would just encourage any of you or community members that are interested in talking about that. And it's interesting because I have 16 seconds. Even someone that may not think high density is a good idea should come and be part of that conversation, because I think we really can look to solutions to helping our housing crisis in our community. Thank you.
Anyone else this evening for persons to be heard? Seeing none, that would bring us to consent agenda.
There isn't one.
There isn't one. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's go to board, commission, and committee appointments then. There's one of those.
I move to appoint Michelle Kavoras to a 3-year term on the Health Needs and Human Services Commission.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Michelle. Is there any public comment?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. As with everybody who will offer their time and expertise to serve on a board or commission, I feel it appropriate to come up and to say thank you. Michelle Kavoris, I'm also surprised that we don't really talk about them. They submit an application, and some of them are quite interesting in where they've been and what they've done, how long they've been in Sitka. And Michelle is looking to be on the Health Needs and Human Services Committee. And actually, if you go over her application, it is seemingly a very good match. She has only been in Sitka for 10 months, but she certainly seems to have been very actively engaged within community processes. She is a counselor at the Sitka Counseling, and she is a certified alcohol and drug counselor, as well as a recovery specialist. Previously, she is a program manager for the residential services of Sitka Counseling. And prior, she had 8 years experience in Illinois. When you mention Illinois to me, I'm sorry, the Blues Brothers have destroyed that image, and I think of Joliet and the Blues Brothers, but that's okay. But I'd like to congratulate Michelle for offering her time and expertise, and I think she'll be a wonderful fit. And thank you for your service.
Any other comment on the appointment? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Sarah?
All right, on the motion to appoint Michelle Kavoris to a 3-year term on the Health Needs and Human Services Commission, Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item A.
Thank you. So item B tonight, our unfinished business, is the action plan for the Tourism Task Force recommendations. A couple step process this evening where the assembly can tweak and make recommendations of, but tonight it will start with an overview from Amy Ainsley, and then we'll have some opportunities to provide feedback to staff after her overview. So Amy, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. Amy Ainsley, Planning and Community Development Director. So when the Assembly met at a special meeting on May 16th to review and adopt the recommendations from the Tourism Task Force, the direction given to staff at that time was to convert the recommendations into an action plan. And so that's what we've put forward for your consideration. And so in putting the actions together, we kind of looked at a couple of different things. First is that some of the recommendations, while separate, can be implemented under one action. So we tried to group together like recommendations into kind of collapsed actions as much as possible. We also then wanted to mark the priority level of certain actions based on the discussion that took place at that May 16th meeting. And so it's our hope that we accurately captured what those high priority items were coming from the Assembly's discussion. But those are, of course, subject to your revision and stuff, because we tried to base that again on what we thought was conveyed to us as your priorities. And so the priority levels are marked as high, which are actions that can be taken within the next 1 to 3 months. Medium are actions that could take place over about a 4 to 6 month time frame. And then there's ongoing actions. So these are either kind of general policy directions or projects that are already underway. And so we marked those as ongoing. So the action list is then kind of broken down. You can see that, it's marked by the directive number, the recommendation number, and then, pulled together into an actual single action where possible. The priority level is marked. And then we also went through and kind of marked where we need action from the Assembly and the administrator. So that would be direction to the administrator or items where the assembly can act on its own through two sponsors. I think you guys have had a fair amount of time with the action list, so I won't kind of go through line by line. But really what we're hoping for tonight is to kind of get through as much of the tasking list as possible. And so this is separated into two categories. The first is the one where we need assembly direction, and then the administrator can work from the direction that is given. On those, it's also, I think, completely fine as well to say more information is needed. We want to bring back just that one item at a future meeting. That I think that's a good outcome of going through those direction items. If the body has the will to give us that direction tonight, we can start working on those particular items that are high priority. And on the second category here are items where we would need assembly sponsors to help kind of work through a potential code change. And so identifying those two sponsors so that staff can work with them a little bit more, also pull in other boards or commissions that would want to be a part of that review as well. So we can kind of start working that more offline and again, with those other groups that are interested in those, and then bring those back in the form of an ordinance.
Any questions for Amy while she's up here right now? Yeah, I wouldn't go too far, but thank you for that overview. So moving down, we did hear from Amy that there are some thoughts for the administrator on some priorities. Does the assembly have thoughts on any of those? Do we want to change ranking? Do we want to make sure that something gets done on the action list here? Scott and then JJ.
I'm kind of thinking that the zoning of Catlean Bay should be a little bit higher priority, because if you can't go back and make a zoning change once somebody starts a construction project, I don't think. And with all of the Love Boat stuff going on, that Catlean Bay seems like a pretty likely place for some entities to throw a bunch of money in and build another cruise dock while we're trying to get transmission lines out to the McGraw-Holland dock and then further out. So that's just one thing I saw reviewing this.
JJ?
That's a good point. Yeah, the medium is 4 to 6 months. Does that seem too slow of a process to you? Okay, more than that. Yeah. The item 6 directive, the continuing to collect data listed as medium, I'm thinking that could be bumped to high as to get done on the heels of this next kind of travel season. Something in October, November, I think would be wise to capture that community input for their feelings and their impact from this season. So that could be kind of elevated to high, and consideration of that from visitor enhancement or CPV funds, I think is an important thing we can discuss or just go with. And then that would become probably a supplemental appropriation and add to the list of assembly action.
John, your thoughts on your potential timeline on to continue collecting data? Do we have anything slated for the end of this season, or?
What we have for collecting data right now are the basically the counters that we're using for our recreational assets, so the Cross Trail, Baranof Warm Springs. But if we're talking about collecting data as in economic impact studies or community impact studies, the timeline is going to be largely dependent on consultants. So we'll have to make the appropriation to get the funding, which will take a few readings, and then we'll have to put out the proposal to secure a consultant to do that work. So could take a handful of months to get someone on board to do that. And then they would likely need, I'm thinking out loud here, they would likely need a season if we're going to talk about, you know, the impact while it's happening. They might need to be present during a tourist season. I don't know how much they can complete in the off season. So it could take upwards of a year, I would think, to get good, reliable studies back.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're
Sure.
saying, sorry, I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify that we'd have to get moving now if we want to do it for next year.
Correct.
Yes, the kinds of impact studies that were discussed with the Tourism Task Force were community impact, economic impact, and environmental impact, which is a pretty broad brush strokes there of what this visitor industry is doing for our community and doing with and doing around our community. So getting that going within the next 1 to 3 months, I'd list that as high.
A suggestion on that as well, as it will take supplemental appropriations. I think a couple of assembly members could grab onto it and indicate exactly what studies they were looking at having done, and then we can get that the supplemental appropriation rolling and for in front of the assembly for consideration. Tor?
So are you thinking like a discussion decision, excuse me, on just that on a future meeting to hash out the broad outlines and then send it, ask staff to put something together for us? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
That can be the longer way. I think 2 or 3 members could jump on one that they feel is a priority, or 1 or 2 or 3 even, and go from there. Vote it up or vote it down. But either way is doable within the confines that we work within. Please, if you have more. I said, please, if you have more.
Well, no, I
like
just
you
was
were-
thinking, are we, I mean, I don't think this is particularly controversial to do something like this. So do we just want to have people raise their hands, say they'll co-sponsor it, and then let everybody else tear into it?
Yeah, if the sponsors would like to get together on an item right now, either you're welcome to, or, up to 3 offline can definitely do that as well. JJ?
I was thinking right now, if we're looking at the steps, we're talking about the action list and not necessarily the tasking list. But if we want to combine, let's go for it. But those were my comments on the recommendation 6. I also have other thoughts on other recommendations down in the 20s. I can continue to go unless anyone wants to speak of something else in directive 1.
Please.
Okay. In directive 4, the idea around 21, recommendation 21, the kind of broad stroke topic is align birthing policies and fees. But in the paragraph, it speaks of kind of a nice how to do that. It talks about a new management structure which brings facilities together. It's recommended. Those facilities being harbors, GPIP, the new floatplane facility, and our airport, with the idea of a port director position. That's listed as ongoing because it is a long-term effort, but the idea of a port director position to kind of unify some similar topics that the city does, is that of interest and of discussion within this group?
I think I'm tracking where you're going. What would be the immediate action that you would request as opposed to an ongoing?
Just someone to do task 21, 22, 23, and aspects of I believe it was mentioned on page 11, which is part of the lightering facility policy under 3, take out the peak. Like if we're wanting to address this in a long-term way, does that just become part of John's plate to do within the next 1 to 6 months? Or do we start looking at some longer-term solutions to have a person in place when these facilities come online to organize and implement what we're building?
Okay. John, as this is ongoing, it was indicated earlier that it may already be started. Do you have anything on birthing policies and lightering facilities? And I don't know if you've looked at that yet or not.
When we mention ongoing, well, there's a couple things that are ongoing. I know that the Ports and Harbor Commission and the GPIP Board of Directors, they are trying to align their fees, you know, that we don't want the two facilities competing against each other really and creating maybe unfair advantages to different groups. So that discussion is taking place now. And as Ms. Carlson has already mentioned, there's a lot more facilities coming on board, specifically the seaplane base and potential haul out. So things are getting a little more complicated. So we are looking at a better governance structure, or I shouldn't say better, a more efficient governance structure, because ports and harbors and GPIP seem to be merging more and more every day. So we have a consultant that just finished the report that was funded last year. We started a port study, and Melissa in here, she's here. We've gone back and forth with that consultant already to get that report finalized. We had a few questions that they still needed to answer. So we do have some recommendations from them and a recommended fee structure and kind of what other communities are doing. But that's work that's taking place right now. And there is some recommendations in that report for building the structure as you've suggested.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. And then moving on to recommendation 29. It also in Directive 4, the topic of downtown improvements. It is ongoing with a kind of spotlight on the Lincoln Street repaving project. There are other public works projects happening in the downtown area. And if we could recommend or suggest like one of those 10-minute special reports at the beginning of an assembly meeting, kind of giving a status update on whatever projects are happening around. For Lincoln Street repaving, the Crescent Harbor Rest-A-Room, High Load Dock, Seawalk Phase 2, those types of projects. Also, let's say Catley Street project, so that the community knows that we are looking at and investing in our downtown core. So scope, design, timeline, and budget, kind of a brief overview of those to see what those improvements look like and just to get us all on the same page of time and budget that's out there. Is that something we're interested in?
Tor and then Kevin.
So I'm looking at this and there's lots of things on here that we could spend the rest of the night talking about. I mean, you know, we could, and to cover the whole thing, we can just vote to extend the meeting now. But I'm thinking that this is screaming work session on just this, and with hopefully maybe facilitated with charts and basically saying, okay, you know, Kevin and Tim, you're going to take this one, and, you know, me and JJ are going to do this one or whatever. And, you know, as much as I love going to more meetings, but I think this, a few hours, like maybe on a Saturday or something where we have the flip charts and we kind of say, okay, this is, because a lot of this is going to require various assembly members to, and at an actual meeting like this is just not a good time to brainstorm. It's not a good way. It's hard, and I've already stepped on Stephen once, and I apologize for that. And it strikes me that more of a informal, let's work out the outlines of a plan, or at least we can raise our hands and say, okay, I'll take this one, we'll take that one, whatever. And get an idea of where people are, so we're on spinning our wheels. So that'd be kind of my, because there's some things I want to talk about on here too, but I'm sure we all have our various ones that we want to talk about, and I just don't think this is very conducive to brainstorming and talking about how to get things done at the assemblyman table.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, one thing on JJ, on your question about public works projects, I met with Ron Vincent about a month or so ago, talking about what capital projects are going on. And we were talking, and I thought, I was planning to try to find a sponsor in around October sometime, bringing in discussion, direction, working with John and Ron to give the assembly the chance to weigh in and just what you're saying, so find out where projects are, if there's any priority changes, things like that. Because I'd like to move Lincoln up as more of a priority, repaving, but so that's something I'm planning on doing. We can do that together. We can sponsor something, work with John and Ron on that. And then as far as the rest of it, I tend to agree with Tor. I mean, this is a lot of stuff and a lot of work went into it. So if we start hashing out every little thing, yeah, it's going to be a long meeting, which I don't have a problem with, but I agree that it's more effective if we want to really drill down to some. I think it's probably a good idea to take a Saturday and where it's a little less formal and you can just kind of hash out ideas. But I wanted to ask, not that those you're bringing up good points, and I think like Torsani has points, we all have points. John, you and Amy worked on this kind of together, right? This list?
On summarizing the list.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as far as the priority level, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I have concerns about kind of changing the priority levels just here at this meeting without getting more in depth to it, because this as it is a huge list for the staff to undertake. And I'm concerned about staff's ability to get regular projects done, not because of anything wrong with staff, but because there's a shortage of staff and the city has a lot of projects going on. And so I would hate to just here at the table say, well, this has to be a priority right now. And we don't really have the time to get into the details where staff could get involved and talk a little more deeply. So I'm agreeing more with Tor. I like this kind of as it is. I'm not really interested in moving the priority levels up or down. I think they're good as set. And since staff's had eyes on them too, I think they are probably, if they had thought there was something they couldn't accomplish on this list, I think that they would have told us. So in the interest of being kind of practical, I would like to either approve these and then assign the ones that need to be assigned, or possibly talk about a couple of us, whatever, sponsoring or whatever we need to do to get a Saturday work session where we can really get into the weeds. Those are my thoughts.
I think that kind of was the point, my understanding anyway, of why we asked to have this come back prioritized, is to approve it as a whole generally. If there are items we didn't like on the plan, we could easily rip them out, and then have assembly members bring back priorities or special projects. I do worry about capacity as well, and what everything honestly is a high priority. Like, we need to work on this sooner than later, but we're quickly going to run out of capacity at that point. So that's something that needs to be balanced as well. Another meeting in July is going to be difficult for me. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but it's going to be difficult in the month of July, and this is kind of when we need to do it, and that's partially why I was excited about having a list here that a couple assembly members could grab onto any of the items and bring them back and start developing them with staff, with boards, with commissions, so that this isn't forgotten about. Because the last thing I want is the months and months of tourism task force plan to be forgotten about. So if the assembly determines we need a special or a work session, we can definitely head down that path. But I had felt that this ranking was kind of in lieu of that. I thought that's the direction we'd wanted to go before. Chris?
I definitely understand the desire for a work session and being able to speak very freely about things and kind of brainstorm and all that. I do see a couple things on here that I think need to start being worked on immediately. Negotiating an agreement for visitor numbers, I think being one of them, because as time goes by, schedules are being made and plans are being made. So I think the faster we can work on that, is probably a good thing and not delaying that. You know, certain things I could see being pushed off for the moment. Establishing tourism commission, we've already been kind of working on it, and I'm sure hopefully we can just keep going towards that. I think moving on that is probably a smart idea, and getting that established, hopefully for this fall. So a couple of things I think I would like to get moving on, maybe set direction tonight. And then a few other things, yeah, we could put off for a potential work session.
Thank you, Chris. And I do appreciate that. And just to clarify, I don't personally feel like we need a work session right now. What I would like to do when I came in here, I would like to vote this as is, assign tasks for that assembly members need to do. And then if there's something, what I'm trying to say is if there's people who feel passionately about something that really needs some more work, maybe they can ask for a work session, you know, something like that. So unless somebody has any, actually, no, I'll just wait for your direction, but I'm done with my comments.
Tor?
Yeah, if we're gonna move on some of this, there's some issues that are left hanging, and right at the very top, I mean, talking about negotiating about numbers. Well, what numbers? You know, and do we have that ability? You know, that haven't been really set. And, you know, same with the Tourism Commission. How are we gonna, I guess if a couple members were on that, would determine its makeup. But you know, if we're gonna just say in general, we like this list, but we're gonna, obviously the devil's gonna be in the details when we actually start forming ordinances. You know, it's one thing to say, okay, we need food cart permits, which is just randomly grab that one. But when we actually bring it out, that's when it's going to get, I guess, you know, more complicated. So I wouldn't have a problem saying, okay, you know, we'll approve this list, but with the understanding that it's not going to be, when we actually start doing things, it's going to get much, much more complicated and much more contentious depending on what comes out. So.
I would add my thoughts to a TBMP. I think I'm supportive of that. I would agree that that's something that should be started working on. I think that's kind of a good thing for our tourism director to start looking at once that position is hired. Heard some feedback earlier that those are generally done by industry, so that industry comes together. And I really like that idea because I, as a business owner, don't want to be told what to do. But if I'm part of a group who rises up and makes everything better, then I have more buy-in. And so I fear that if we tell businesses what to do, and the product comes out of the municipality, that we get less buy-in on that. But if we find a stakeholder and a group that would want to work together on that, then we can get a little bit more buy-in and then support for that program. Scott?
Are you thinking that the people that rent the e-bikes should come up with the best management practices for the people that are tooling around on the trails? And is that what you meant by, you know, industry? Like have those guys come up with the plan first, hand it in, and then?
Ideally, yes. I think that those operators understand the friction points right now, and they understand their industry the best, and they know how they can work together to smooth some of those. I'm not saying that regulations won't be needed later, but the stakeholder in that group generally has one of the best understandings of. Anything else tonight on the action list and prioritization? There is another section tonight looking for potential assembly sponsors. Initially, just 4 items in front of us. However, the assembly could grab on to any of these items that they wanted to assist with and prioritize. At this point, is there any assembly members who are jonesing to deal with food cart permits or downtown vacancies? JJ?
I have interest in the tourism commission, establishing the tourism commission and looking into kind of e-bikes and just general bike policy in this community.
Chris, sorry.
Yeah, I'm on for the tourism commission, helping with that.
And I'll do e-bikes.
I was thinking tourism commission too. I saw the recommended makeup, and I have some issues with that. So if you guys will have me, I'd like to be involved with the drafting on that. I guess, what was the other one? For now, I guess, if that's, right now, at least the ones that are, really wanted to look at. One thing I did thought, just in the general thought, is that some of these, we could, like the zoning issues, honestly, I'd say let's throw them at the planning commission and let them do the legwork for us, because, and then we can, you know, because doing that at this table, I don't think is great, and they're better able to do it for both Catlin and other ones. I mean, that's the planning and zoning commission. So I would say let's task them there.
Another tool which is within our purview. Kevin, and then we'll go back to Chris.
So I see everybody's jumping at the food cart thing. I would be willing to do it if I could get a sponsor to help me. Who did?
Oh,
Scotty?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh. So lose.
And then Chris.
Yeah, I was gonna speak to Tor's comment about putting it to the planning commission. I think that's a great idea. And that does fall under assembly direction, so I feel like that is, you know, pertinent. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And also understanding that while these are ones that could use assembly sponsorship, it all doesn't have to be done now. These are ones that can be picked up as the process moves forward and as you see a need for them. If the assembly isn't desirous of tackling downtown vacancy in the manner that the Tourism Commission recommended at this point, we also don't have to pick it up tonight. Tor?
No, oh, I'm sorry.
Chris?
I guess I do have one quick question, on 5B, the AML Port Communities Working Group. I guess. Now I'm seeing it. Yeah. What is the ask here? Are we asking to continue with the Port Communities Group or just working with them, for the future?
There's some work that's happened here already as that group comes together. It originally started as the Port Communities of Alaska, I think is the name we formed. And this started during COVID. And we were really just working together and exchanging information when we returned to cruising after the pandemic. We saw a lot of value in that group as it was typically city managers, administrators. It's not a legislative body at all. If I could parallel it to anything, it'd be something like CSWA, the Southeast Alaska Solid Waste Association, where Southeast Alaskan communities talk about their municipal solid waste issues and how you can collaborate. That's really what this group is turning into. The group has contacted AML, and AML has started with the administration of it. In fact, charter and really bylaws have been put together, and determining what membership looks like. So we're really close there. So I'm going to continue on that work. I think the decision that the assembly is going to have to likely make in the very near future. There's just like with CSWA or any of these Southeast Conference, you name any of these groups, there's usually some sort of membership fee. We're developing that right now. It could be a few cents per visitor that comes ashore. As that gets worked out, it will likely fit in our existing budget, but we may have to come forward at a later date and say, hey, this is what membership costs to be part of this organization. This is what the bylaws look like. Are you all okay with us remaining a part of that group? Because I've said this before, what happens in one community can greatly affect another one. For example, the issue about the Ship-Free Saturday in Juneau came up. If Juneau somehow moves to a ship-free Saturday, then those ships are going to be looking for somewhere to go. And it could be us, it could be Skagway, it could be, Klawock is open for business now. So being able to communicate within that group, when something happens in one community, what the other community can expect would be very helpful. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that totally.
Tor?
Yeah, so just to kind of recap a little bit where we're at. So Tourism Commission, we got, Tim, you said you were gonna do e-bikes, right? Or,
JJ and Tim,
okay, so you got two people. Food cup permits.
Kevin and Scott,
Yeah, and downtown vacancy, we're not gonna worry about right now.
so far.
So far, yeah. So negotiating agreement for future visitors. How, I guess, I'll come back to that for a sec here. The zoning, I think we were gonna throw the zoning commission. But if we're gonna negotiate the agreement for future, for visitor numbers, who does that? And, how do we go about doing that?
Happy to answer that, Mayor, or at
Yeah,
least
please.
make an attempt at it. Something that's unique to Sitka is the dock owner is a private facility, right? And our lightering facilities are owned by the municipality. So both the dock owner and the city have some abilities to say, this is enough for me and this is enough for me. And we can hear from the community and be partners. And I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but the cruise industry doesn't really have to be part of that negotiated agreement. If the city says 1,000 or 2,000 is enough at our lightering facility any day, we have every ability to do that. So we can work directly with the dock owner and come up with something that works for our community based on the input that's in this task force report. We could work on something together and develop an MOA, an MOU, whatever you want to call the negotiated agreement. I don't know if we want to go as formal as a contract. But we could use this as the guidance for what that agreement would look like. And of course, nothing would be signed until it comes back here before the body and there would be public comment on it. So to answer your question, what it would look like and who would do it, I would be the one that would communicate with the dock owner, try to put something together to at least bring back to the table for some public input on what if we hit the mark. But I'll reiterate that what we're going to use to negotiate is what the task force provided us with. We'll use that as a target.
Kevin?
So John, when you're doing that, obviously, yeah, I appreciate your answer. I think it's a good answer. And I agree, we don't need to work with the cruise lines as far as MOU. We can work directly with the Sitka terminal. And plus because we own the loitering facility. Would it be possible so you're going to find out what they're comfortable with or what have you and come up with like 2 or 3 numbers, or do you want to just go for it based on this and then bring it back? If we don't like it, then you just go back to the drawing board.
I mean, ultimately, again, we'll use this as the target. And again, I've got to be cautious here, that it's hard to extend into a private facility and how they want to run their operation. But I can say that we can flex based on what they're doing. So that agreement would have language in there that says if X on your side, then Y on our side to try to get to Z for the total number. And I think that's where, there might be numbers in there, but if the assembly or the public wanted to recommend any changes to that, it would mostly be on our side of what that total equation looks like.
Yeah, that helps. I did meet and speak with the owner of the dock, and he seemed, we didn't really discuss numbers per se, but he seemed very interested in working with the community. So thank you. I like that idea of having you do it based on the recommendations, working with them. I would prefer that than just deciding an arbitrary number right now.
My only concern on that is that, number one, the lighting facility obviously makes money for the city. 2, the impact coming out of the lighting facility is lower. I mean, there's no buses. So I would hate to, I would be a little concerned that we're like, okay, the numbers are too high this day. We're going to cut off our revenue source and cut off the actual lower impact tourists because because they're at the dock. And so I'm not sure, hopefully your negotiations go well, but I think that it sounds like if we want to lower numbers, our only way we're going to do it is by making our operations, take the hit. But I hope, I guess I'll wait to see how they come out, but that concerns me a bit.
Chris?
This was a really tough subject for the task force. Being at most of the meetings there, it was something that they were struggling to wrestle with a certain number. In the end, given the surveys and everything, we have a pretty divided community. So that made it very difficult. But also, in the end, they also figured out that they needed more data to really come down with a hard number. And I think we're going to kind of find the same thing at the moment. And I think that is why more studies and data collection needs to be high prioritized to come up with some sort of hard number. But I think we do have a pretty good baseline and some general broad strokes coming out of the task force that John would be able to use to get some sort of document put together for now, and have something on paper and something that we can work with. you know, some of the things that have come out is stuff that we saw come out of the community. We want to flatten the curve. We want to take out the high peaks. We want to spread the ships out. We do want a quiet day. And I think we can start working towards that now. And then, you know, it'll probably be a living, breathing document is my guess, and can change as new data becomes available. But I do think we need to try to get something down on paper now.
JJ?
And some of what that gets down on paper now, there are some of these directives that have kind of ranges to be considered. So to give what I see as possible, a little more detail to give you more things to negotiate with. Under the category shortening the length of the season, it talks about mid-May through mid-September. A specific there, if we call it an 18-week season. When and how, great, but that would be about a third of the year, a third of the calendar year, would be our high tourism season. I think that's a great kind of parameter to consider. And then under designated quiet days, the language talks about 1 or 2 quiet days per week, with Fridays, Saturdays, and or Sundays being that day. It's quite a range of consideration. If we also look up under 3, taking out the peak, it talks about these Neo-Panamax ships of over 4,000 passenger capacity and considering limitation, the visitation on a weekly basis to 2 to 4 days per week. So if we think about limiting the large vessels and the quiet days together, we can think about like a no ship Saturday and potentially no large ship Friday and no large ship Sunday. And that would preserve some of that community time. That was a big deal in these community meetings that the task force coordinated. And if we look at that as a how to get at the what and the why of the rest of this document, that is nice for several reasons. The safety on HPR with bikes and buses. I've looked at this to the detail of Friday as garbage day along that stretch and those kind of bike hazards. If we eliminate a lot of visitor bike travel along HPR, then we can increase our safety threshold there. Also to scheduling of kind of tour businesses. If you cluster the large ship days and the kind of lesser ship days, then your employee scheduling can become simpler. There's many other frames that I've looked at this through, and I've put myself in the shoes of many people in Sitka and considering these things. Going up, taking out the peak. It's this daily limit between 5 to 7. That's a great range to start, and then we need that additional data to really hone in and target like what can be done with this general idea of, you know, Sitka being, you know, a contained place. We have limited resources to look at, you know, what is the carrying capacity of this community through our economics and, you know, impact on our quality of life. And then flattening the curve, just looking at this industry to ensure it says to ease the anxiety of many residents regarding future growth. That is like, what will it not be? So we're kind of deciding what it is by what it is not, and bringing in the parameters, not necessarily choosing a specific number, but bringing in the outliers and bringing in the range that we want to see based on kind of an evidence and data-driven investigation of this industry.
John?
Thanks, Mayor. The comment was already brought up once before, but you know, the cruise schedule obviously is already written for this year. It's already written for next year as well. If we don't start to put something together here soon, the 2026 calendar is already filling up. And it will be less resistance if we're able to get something at least drafted and together now, so the industry and businesses within our community can plan accordingly. So unless we're directed otherwise, I plan on continuing to work on putting something together and bring that forward for assembly consideration.
Scott?
What I'm hearing you say is that the only way to control the amount of people coming into town is to shut down the city's lightering facilities right now for 2026 would be something that we could control right now without having to go to court or whatever all that is, without picking a number. That would be one thing that we could do because of the private expense that's been incurred out at McGraw's. That's what I'm hearing of all this conversation right now.
John?
I just wanted to, I mean, you're partially correct there. I mean, I'm, again, this is another comment I'm gonna be careful with, but, that I think the community decided on more than one occasion to not own a city dock. But without having that, we have no lever to pull. When it belongs to the city, we could say, we're open today, we're closed tomorrow. That's not an option that we have anymore, other than our own lightering facilities. So yes, you are partially correct, but we can put some bounds on that. Maybe there is a certain number that the community would want. We've heard it before. The smaller ships are good visitors. They bring in a lot of revenue. I think we would want to still welcome those rather than just shut it down completely. But all that has to be considered in developing some sort of an agreement.
Kevin?
Yes, I agree, and I do think that you getting on that is one of the highest priorities here because of what you just said. So I'm in support of that.
Anything else that the assembly wants to tackle on any of these tonight, or that they want to find somebody to work on or reprioritize? I think there's a lot of good information here, and I think it's going to be a lot of work amongst the assembly to continue to work on it, but it is a good start. JJ?
In addition to Tim and me working on e-bikes, if the Parks and Rec Commission could also look at this topic, I think we'd gain some valuable insight there.
I think it'd be very wise to draft something and then have them review it before
Okay.
it comes to the assembly.
Okay. Good idea. Thank you.
Tim?
Yeah, and I think also to have police and fire look at it would be good too, since they're going to be part of their motorized vehicles when we're done. I think the data piece is going to be the key to this. I mean, Chris alluded to it, and I think JJ's brought it up, and I want to add my voice to saying, I think we really do need to put together an ongoing data collection system so that we have good information to work off of as we go forward. Because right now we just have information and we have people feedback. We have a lot of good information, don't get me wrong, but what we don't have is ongoing information and ongoing data that will help us make that decision. So I would like to encourage us to make sure that that's a high priority too, along with working with the doc to figure out what we're doing there.
Dor?
I just want to emphasize, I guess, 18, that I say, I understand that's ongoing already, but I think that deserves a little bit of attention, that's something that, having the Parks and Rec and the staff working on identifying where, I mean, as the tourists spread out, I guess we need to have our facilities either ready or off limits for some of these, for that. So I'm glad that it's being worked on, and I just wanted to kind of say that we need to not let that go through on the by as well. So I mean, I realize it's ongoing. It's not something we have to do right now, but.
Scott?
I'm ready to start tackling the vacancy one too. I know we don't have to do it right now, but I'm just putting out there that I'm 50% into it if somebody else wants to come.
And this is also something we can continue to look for sponsors for as well. So once someone gets some time or.
I'll talk to you. Give me a call. I'll be happy.
Chris?
I do have a quick question with this assembly direction one. Traffic at GPIP. I guess what would we, I do think that that needs to start being addressed. Is that just basically ask you to throw it on, to ask Gary to put on the next GPIP meeting and then that board can start handling it?
Mayor?
I think, yes, it's probably going to be best discussed at a GPIP meeting first. You know, there's a lot of things that are happening that are largely already covered in our code and code enforcement. You know, the complaint is lots of tourists wandering around the industrial park, but the fact of the matter is those roads are still public right of ways. You know, it's hard to really tell people you can't be on a public right of way. But there are a lot of buses that are lined up there. And we have code that talks about authorized bus stops. So we have things we can do already to address this. But I think a discussion with the board has to happen first and really find out if there's something special they want that's outside of code provisions that we already have.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm kind of thinking of when the haul out's in and, you know, we're starting to have that transition of using 8, 9 to 15 and what that's gonna look like. So I guess that was kind of my thought, just looking into the future.
Anything else from the assembly on these items this evening? I think we took a pretty big bite out of a pretty big list. I think that this work is ongoing. I would encourage the assembly not to forget about this list. Make this a living document that you keep with you, just like our strategic plan, because these are our community's priorities that have been vetted over many, many meetings, and this is what they've asked us to start looking at and working on. So I think it would be a very wise decision from us if we continue to go down this path. John, I thank you for the additional workload this is placed on your shoulders. Please task out and pass off as much as possible. It doesn't all have to be you, even though it says administrator on a lot of these. There's a big umbrella beneath you, so make sure that this gets in the hands of the right people as well. Anything final from the assembly? Great. That item took us well past our break, so we'll go ahead and take a recess. Please be seated when you're ready. All right, well, thank you, Assembly. That'll bring us to item C tonight.
I move to approve Resolution 2024-14 on first and final reading, approving submittal and execution of a municipal harbor facility grant Tier 2 application to the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities in the amount of $240,000, $240,408 for the Lyson Harbor Float System and Utilities Repair Project.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 24-14. Is there any public comment? We do. Please excuse us, sir. Is Stan? We've been making you sit here patiently for so very long.
Good evening, Stan Eliason, Harbor Master. So we have a grant opportunity here through the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities, also known as a Municipal Harbor Matching Grant Program. So this is for the half of the construction costs of the, we'll just call it the Eliason Harbor repairs for now. This is specifically for major repairs and not for replacement, since we do plan on, well, hopefully replacing that facility here in the 2030s. The scope consists of rehabilitating the electrical system, water systems, and finger floats. The engineer's total estimate for this project is $1.1 million, and I'm seeking $240,000, $816 from the State of Alaska as a match. And this has, I did bring this up to the Harbor Commission back in May, so they're aware of it. And it seems like recently these smaller Tier 2 grants have been funded first go around, so I'm feeling pretty optimistic about this one. I probably just jinxed myself, but.
Thank you for the introduction. If we have any questions, we'll give you a call. Is there any public comment on resolution 24-14? Please.
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. This is item C, which has to do with the submission of a grant on a Tier 2 facility grant for the harbor. It's a state 50-50 grant, and they offer grants from $50,000 to $5 million. This is dealing with the electrical issues at the Eliason Harbor. Our harbor master mentioned some of the things that they're going to do, and what they're asking for is $240,000, which is the half of what the grant would be. I always ask the question, if we don't get the grant, where is that money going to come from, since this seems to be a high priority? The other thing is, in my popcorn metric, $240,000 means you have to sell $4,008,000 worth of popcorn to get your 6% if it comes out of like general fund. It's a lot of popping. The important thing here that I didn't understand is that it says in the memo that electrical system engineering, design and permitting, and then it had the number 1.1 million, et cetera. And then it said construction cost $480,000. From a linguistic point of view, it didn't separate whether the construction cost was separated from the engineering, design, and permitting. So it seemed kind of odd in understanding whether the 1.1 million is the total cost, where the 480,000. So anyway, as with everything, it's a lot of popcorn. Clearly, since we are a hat-in-hand community, any grant opportunity that is offered us, I think we should certainly take it. And if the harbor master says it looks good on this one, I believe him.
Is there any other public comment on the resolution? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Chris?
So yeah, I think this is a pretty important one. It's gonna do some needed maintenance for Eliason. We've been talking about trying to extend the life of Eliason Harbor to better help us be more financially prepared for it in the future. And I think this will help get us there. Overall, it's a quarter of the raw fish tax that comes into the harbor fund every year. And it's one of our bigger commercial harbors. So considering the main users of that harbor, I feel as though they would believe it's a good use of those funds.
Kevin?
Just gonna say thanks to Stan for finding this and going for it. Appreciate it. Anything we can get to help.
And Stan, I also appreciate the kind of shift in perspective from a complete replacement of this harbor, which we can't afford, to lots of fixes that are going to extend the life. I believe that to be a prudent course of action, not only in this harbor system, but with many of the facilities around Sitka. Sometimes maintenance is lacking, and a little bit of maintenance can go a long way in extending the life of a facility. So I appreciate this perspective and this approach, and hopefully we get that. Anything further from the assembly? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve resolution 2024-14 on first and final reading, Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
and Mr. Pike.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item C.
Item D, please.
I move to approve resolution 2024-15 on first and final reading, authorizing a 50/50 matching grant application to the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance for body worn cameras.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. John, I understand we have the chief or his representative here to introduce this.
Yes, Lieutenant O'Shea.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the Assembly. Following the directive of the Assembly, a couple of months ago when the Chief of Police presented his, the cost of a body-worn camera system here, we were directed to look for a grant, and the grant came out mid-June. And it's a 50/50, so this would be an excellent opportunity to get involved in and apply for, and hopefully be awarded to start off the body-worn camera system.
Appreciate your introduction. If we have any questions, we'll be sure to call you back up.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on resolution 24-15?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. I must admit that this particular item brings out the voyeur in me because I love looking at body cam YouTubes. Some of them are very revealing and it protects our police officers. Some of them are very entertaining. And what I just want to say is we have I don't know who's going to be wearing this, and if it's $250,000 for if we had 16 full officers, the full component, it's $250,000 for these body cams, which, wow, that was kind of surprising. I thought you'd say something like $40,000 or $60,000. As far as the popcorn metric, it's $120,000 for Sitka, and you have to sell $2 million worth of popcorn in order to pay for that 50/50 grant. And that's, by the way, the large popcorn is $10, so it's $200,000. I think we need this, and I hope this is now part of the Freedom of Information Act. I hope that these will be easily obtained by citizens of Sitka if they are worn, and the rules of when they are turned on need to be highly explicit and made public. So I think we need the system here. It could be very helpful and also informative as to what's going on. And people have to understand what body cams are. That means every interaction will be FOIA-able. How do you spell that? Anyway, thank you.
Anyone else on resolution 24-15?
Good evening. My name is Austin Cranford. I am also in support of this grant. There are several reasons we should have body cameras. I know it came up during the budget meeting and the assembly bypassed it. There was no discussion during the budget meeting. So that it's good that it's coming up now. Specifically, the reason this should be funded and why we should have body cameras is we've had several incidents, both currently and previously in Sicko, where body cameras could have saved the city from a lawsuit. For example, there's currently a ADA lawsuit against the city regarding an incident that happened over on the Search campus. There was the lawsuit regarding, I believe it was a teenager in the prison cell there at the jail. There was the taser incident that happened at Totem Park. So there was plenty of incidences where cameras would have been very helpful in protecting the city or in assisting the victims in those events. As mentioned by Ween, the main concern is when would they get turned on. Having mentioned several events, I think the assembly should move to have a regulation or ordinance that they be turned on anytime an officer exits their vehicle or anytime they're dealing with a member of the public. Also stated by him, yes, they should be, the videos should be able to be requested. I know we have a statute in the law that says information can't be requested if it's currently under investigation, but I'm sure, I know for a fact there's ways around it, specifically if they're being used in court cases, they have to be turned over to the court. But even after the investigation, they should be able to be requested by the general public. Thank you.
Anyone else on the resolution? Assembly deliberation? John?
Do you mind if I have the lieutenant come up to just answer a few more,
please,
questions that can probably clarify some things for the assembly?
John O'Shea.
I'll try to rapid fire for you here.
Yes, sir.
On the cost estimates, what was this assuming? Was it assuming that every position, whether filled or not, would have a camera, or is this to cover the
Initially,
positions that are
it is to
physically
cover
here?
the starting number of 10 cameras, okay, and having 2 extra. Yes, we're hoping that we can fill all 16, but this is the initial estimate that we started with, so that it's not outrageously expensive for the city at the moment. So we'd be starting with 10. Each officer would be issued a camera, which would be initiated on any field contacts with a civilian. And then 2 extras just for additional officers, or when one gets broken, there is no excuse that an officer will not have a camera.
Okay. And then my other question was, also looking at the FOIA requests. I know that previously we had looked at systems that do cloud storage and can do automatic redaction. Are we still looking at those systems to help kind of speed along
Yes.
and keep those records?
Yes, we are still evaluating. Currently, we are evaluating the Axon system, which has a digital evidence locker, which is cloud-based, has an AI run a redacting system. Because these body cameras are a two-edged sword, because it can be used, not predominantly they're designed to protect police officers and the citizens that we serve, but at the same time, that same technology can be used to attack the private citizen. So there are going to be specific rules with regards to these FOIA requests, because we're going to follow law, but it is something where people will request the most embarrassing moment in another person's life so they can publish it on the internet. Okay, so it is a two-edged sword.
Thanks. As a follow-up, do you have a cost of the storage yet? Because obviously there's going to be cost to that system as well.
Right. The annual cost would be around 30,000 a year. That's the initial estimate at this point. Of course, we would be following retention rules with regards to how long the videos are stored, so that, of course, there'll be a 3-year hold on a majority of videos. Any criminal cases, of course, they'll be held until the case is adjudicated. But so far, we've only been evaluating it for a month. I need to take a look at what my officers that have saved in a month with regards to data, which will give us a better idea of how much it will be in the future when we have 8 officers carrying cameras.
Thank you. Anything else for the lieutenant while he's up here? I do have one more quick one. I've seen similar grants come through, 50/50 matching grants for body armor, where we can replace body armor frequently. Is this a similar grant program where we can replace cameras frequently as well?
We're depending on the program, sometimes they offer it as a continuing basis where they'll offer another 50/50 for basically technology changes in 2 years and the newest best model comes out. It'd be something we'd have to apply for separately. It's not a continuously ongoing grant like the body armor grant, which is ongoing. It's been going, that particular grant has been going for 30 years. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Scale this. So if you don't receive the matching grant for, the price of 12 cameras, can you go back to it and ask for 6? Was there any way, was there a minimum threshold? And that's why you went for funding of 12?
We went because that was the estimate we got from both estimate, just simple estimates from both Motorola and from Axon. So we just went with their numbers for now on requesting it. How much the grant will approve is up to their review boards or how they approve it. So in my experience, if they are going to give it to us, they'll give us 120.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Appreciate your time. Tor?
I just wanted to comment that when this came up during the budget, we, like he said, we told the chief that this is something we'd probably like to do, but didn't want to pay for right now and go out and find grants. And that's exactly what he did. So I want to applaud him for that. I mean, we're going to have these things one way or the other here soon. And so this way, at least, we're not taking the whole bill, but I think it's pretty obvious this is the way the world is going. We've talked about it at length. So I'm glad we're getting some help with it.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm fully in support of this. I think it's a great idea. I'm also heartened to know that you're looking into that software, because I think that is crucial, because we have to be aware of staff time, the ability to manage those public records requests, and also, yes, that the things that need to be redacted are redacted, and that's very important. So I think this is great. Thank you.
Anything further from the assembly? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve resolution 2024-15 on first and final reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
and Mr. Pike.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item D.
Item E, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2024-19 on first reading, amending the official Sitka zoning map to rezone 201 Price Street from industrial to general commercial mobile home.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. John, I understand Amy has an introduction for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and some members. Amy Ainsley, Planning and Community Development Director. So the request that's before you in this ordinance is to rezone 201 Price Street, which is owned by Hanson & Hanson Enterprise. The property is fairly large, about a 3,600 square foot lot. It currently has a 6,000 square foot building on the property that's used for boat repair, and that type of business. The property owner would like to subdivide the property and to retain one property for the, the existing building and business that's there, and to use the other half of the lot as a mobile manufactured home park. The zoning code for the industrial zone district does not allow mobile and manufactured home parks, and that's why the request to rezone to C2 has been requested. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their May 1st meeting, and it was unanimously recommended for approval. Staff also recommended approval on this item as well before the Planning Commission. We felt that it did not result in a spot zone. It was, this is a bit of a messy area in terms of our zoning map, but we feel this is fairly consistent with the rest of the area, kind of aligns the boundaries better with how the property is accessed. And so we are bringing forward the rezoning for your consideration tonight and hopefully for a second reading as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Is there any public comment on ordinance 24-19?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. This is item E, and it's amending the official zoning map for 201 Price Street from industrial to general commercial, which is C2. I think Ms. Ainsley said 3,600 square feet, but it's 36,000 square feet, which is just shy of a full acre. The desire is to cut the lot in half, which would allow, Mr. Hansen to maintain his business and then to develop the other half, which I think is absolutely great. And if he is so motivated to do it, the assembly certainly needs to do that. If you look at the packet and you see the aerial views, you can see it's kind of an interesting area based on the satellite view, I presume. And I see a lot of boats parked on the portion of his lot, and I hope he's able to find, it may be an old photo, but hope he's able to find space to allow his business to continue and thrive, since he is quite an asset to the community with his skills. One question I do have, and that is, will there be soil testing? Thank you. But vote yes on this.
Anyone else on 24-19? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2024-19 on first reading, Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Celine?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
And Mayor Eisenpeis?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0. Item E, first reading.
Item F, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2024-20 on first reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2025, chamber Visit Sitka base and supplemental funding.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Would either of the other two sponsors like to introduce this one? JJ?
I've been selected by Fingerpoint. So what this is about is, funding the chamber to do Visit Sitka for the upcoming year. There's 3 points of the contract to be funded, or for the assembly to consider funding. The 300,000 kind of base for the next calendar year, starting January 1st, 2025 through December. And then 275,000 for the current fiscal year that we're in, for those special projects that were listed, that we've reviewed in the packet here tonight. And the third 10,000 for us to direct a contractor for an independent financial review in alignment with Section 10 of that contract we have with the Chamber for the Convention and Visitors Bureau services. Those are kind of the three kind of fiscal aspects to it, just to keep what services we have going and see one more great year of convention and visitor services in Sitka.
I would just add that normally this item comes up during the budget process. However, throughout the budget process, the Assembly did not deal with this. We found it prudent to continue with visitor services. And so this funds it essentially status quo in years past, with exception to the audit in order to not only quell some Assembly concerns, but potentially open the door for allowable uses of CPV funding in order to get that back in, or get that into Visit Sitka. Is there any public comment on ordinance 24-20?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. This is money for Visit Sitka, but it turns out it's also for the Chamber of Commerce. A couple of things. One, I don't think it's interesting that all of a sudden you're getting a review of the monies that are reviewed, because it's hard to know precisely how things are being spent. And I think that there is an overriding spending on cruise passengers, meaning the day trippers, as opposed to people who will stay here, the longer term tourism. And I think that really needs to be parsed out, and appropriate funding via the bed tax or the CPV be given. I cannot believe, since this in essence, under any definition of conflict of interest, the board of the Chamber of Commerce seems to be heavily weighted to the cruise, day tripper kind of industry. So in essence, they are promoting their own. And I think that, I don't know whether that's fine or not, but I do believe that it's how you spend your money. And I think the Assembly and the people of Sitka need to know how this money is being spent, the period. And I think that currently we really don't need to talk about, in essence, spend any money on day trippers, because I already think that that is an item that is totally in motion. So we can take that money and earmark it for, I'll say, refining how we want to go forward for the future of Sitka. Let me tell you, do you think anybody here been to Klawock? I don't think Klawock needs a Pentamax. I think that'll be cultural destruction if they start doing that stuff. Bottom line is, we need to know where this money is going, as opposed to just handing it out. So having financial review, I still don't know, in looking through it, what precisely they're going to be looking for. The other thing is, $275,000, again, as I mentioned at a previous meeting, is $4.5 million of popcorn. The $300,000 is $5 million worth of popcorn, and the accountant is $666,000 worth of popcorn sales to pay for all of this. And I think that it is very important to understand where money comes from and how it's spent. And I don't know how what's happening now fully answers that question. Thank you.
Anyone else on 24-20? Back to the Assembly for deliberation. Tor?
Yeah, so when I was looking at this, I thought about trying to propose an amendment, I still might, to pull the 275. I have to admit that looking at through this paperwork, I am concerned about the mixture between the chamber and Visit Sitka. You know, the $41,000 in rent, and not, I really am very happy to see the audit in there because that I think is overdue. But I don't think, I'm not gonna waste your time if there's nobody who agrees with me, but I would personally like to see the 275 pulled. But because I do think that this, you know, in the past at least, this has been completely done by the bed tax. And so it strikes me that they should be focusing in on long-term tourists. And, you know, I know that we talked about trying to use CPV funds and hopefully we will, because as their mission changes, I think the funding source needs to change. But I'm not gonna push that. I'm not gonna waste everybody's time, but I do think that we should, I'd like to see the 275 pulled.
Kevin?
Thank you for your comments, Tor. I understand. I would like to, just so you know, I'd like to stick with it as it is and improve it as is.
JJ?
In the memo, there's a few sentences and paragraphs that kind of say, sponsors request, sponsors intend. And if that's, if there could be, an asterisk to say, this money contingent upon, what's written in this memo. I'm not sure how we stipulate things like that to them, but they'd like to make sure that the contractor sees those kind of special notes to really work with the finance department to figure out a report structure so that when the time comes to potentially seek 140,000 in plausible funding from CPV, that everything is in place to potentially make that switch from visitor enhancement to CPV. Great.
Thank you. You know, I think what's clear to me is through time, the mission of this particular Visit Sitka has evolved a bit, right? Like when they first started, the number of cruise ship passengers was much lower. And we were trying to enhance tourism, and that was the mission in place. And then, but we don't have another organization to deal with the visitors who come on the cruise ships at this point in time, and their mission has evolved. And I think during the budget process, we talked quite extensively about, changing their funding structure a bit so that the commercial passenger vessel tax could be used for that. And I think that's where we should head, rather than just getting to the point of saying you're on the wrong track. They're not on the wrong track. This is the track that we're on right now, and we need to figure out how we're going to pay for this. I think we've made very clear as an assembly that we are interested in enhancing the non-cruise ship visitors, and I think they've heard that loud and clear. But regardless, as I've indicated before, when the people show up and they ask the questions, we need someone to answer those questions, and that's what they're doing right now. So I'm not in favor of changing what we're doing at this point in time in terms of where we are at this moment. I like the audit information. I think that's going to help us going forward to see where we're headed, and that we can use that tax, because unfortunately for the contract that we have in place, a portion of their time is being spent on the cruise ship passengers, whether we like that or not. So that's where I'm at on this one.
Chris?
Yeah, I've obviously as a sponsor, I like what we put forward here. Visit Sitka is very much a needed organization. They do help us out a lot with our cruise tourism, whether it's through wayfinding maps, just general information about the community. And, you know, that does cost money to have to do that. That's where I think this financial review will be really beneficial when we start to look at CPV funding, for helping out with these things. I think at this point, I'm okay with giving the additional 275. Just because I don't have a reason to cut it, without more justification, I guess, other than just cutting it. So right now, I'm gonna go with that. But maybe upon the financial review, maybe I'll feel otherwise for future budgets.
JJ.
Question for you, John. If this goes through and amended, do you have enough information from us for what we'd like to see in that independent financial review?
I believe so. Melissa and I have discussed that already, and we have the information we need.
Great, thank you.
I think kind of along the lines of what Chris had said, I think the assembly understands that we do need to shift our focus in marketing and who we are. I think that was a sticking point on the talks during the budget. And I think that's why we're, kind of unprecedented sitting here doing this after budget season. So as this moves forward, and I believe that assembly members will start gathering ideas on what the potential future looks like. I think we can all agree we didn't have time to do that right now. Would caution us that we always get wrapped up into these timing issues due to the budget cycle and the supplemental funding cycle. So it can become hard, but it's not impossible with base years coming up and then the contract as a whole. I did make a comment at one of our previous meetings on this where I said, the business community relies on this and the business community hasn't been knocking down our doors telling us that they need a change. The flip side of that, since we've had these conversations, the business community hasn't come to me knocking down my doors saying that we need to keep it either. So I would assume that they're listening to these conversations, must be somewhat in line with the direction of the assembly, because I haven't heard either way that the business community needs it or wants it to change. So there will be some outreach due as well, I think, by the assembly in order to find out not only what the citizens are needing out of visitor services, but what the business community, which Visit Sitka really does serve, needs out of a future contract as well. This gets us another year with some high quality marketing and promotion, and then we can start to refine and define where we want to be in the future. Kevin?
Sorry, just one more thing. And I think that's what you guys are, you nailed it, both you and Tim. It's not that we think the chamber is doing anything wrong or Visit Sitka is doing anything wrong. It's more that things are growing and changing. And so the assembly recognizes that how it's all managed needs to change with it. And we'll work on that at the next time we're redoing the contract. So thank you for putting this ordinance up.
Anything, JJ?
One more note on the upcoming tourism manager position within the city. I'm looking forward to seeing exceptional coordination between Visit Sitka and that tourism manager.
Tim?
We all have commented on the fact that the base contract comes due on a calendar year, right? As opposed to a fiscal year. And pretty sure that the assembly at the time put in place that way so that we would not be in the middle of the season when we had a conversation about this. And we give whoever had the contract time to fix that. So those of you who were here when it was put in place, I'm sure can fill that out a little bit more. And I think that's an important thing. I think it's important for us to look at this not in the middle of it, but look at it when we're not in the middle of it. And I think that's why the contract is structured the way it is. And I look forward to that conversation in January.
Anything further from the assembly on this one? JJ?
To follow up on Tim, Tim, are you interested in seeing an annual state of the Sitka Convention and Visitor Bureau's report to the Assembly? That is one of the contract items 4B. Is that something we want to say, we want to see that report in October and then have a follow-up conversation with it and just put something out there?
I've come to realize that the assembly is in need of as much information as they can get about all these things. So, I think whoever put that in place was wise, and I would like, we need all the information we can get as we make these decisions.
So I'd like to make that request, just a verbal one, but if the mayor would like to follow it up as direction, that we do see this thing that's in the Exhibit A for reporting, to have the contractor provide the Assembly an annual state of the Sitka Convention and Visitor Industry Report.
I've taken a note, and I'm sure John has as well. Sarah, on the ordinance?
All right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2024-20 on first reading, Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
No.
and Mr. Yestad.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1 on first reading on item F.
Thank you. That'll bring us to item G.
I move to approve ordinance 2024-16 on first reading, proposing to amend section 11.13 administration of budget of the Home Rule Charter and submitting the question of such an amendment to the qualified voters at the regular election on October 1st, 2024.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Sarah, I understand you have an introduction on this. I probably should have kind of introduced these next couple items as well, because we can't necessarily talk about them all at the same time. But these are some cleanup items that you'll hear from Sarah in order to get us more in line with state law and just clean up our charter a little bit. So, Sarah?
So as Mayor Eisenbais stated, the municipal clerk's office, in consultation with our finance director, Melissa Haley, and our attorney, Michael Gaddy, we drafted 3 ordinances to clarify and improve specific areas of the Sitka Home Rule Charter. And changes to the charter, they are required to go before the voters. So this first ordinance addresses section 11.13G, administration of budget, centralized accounting. And in that, this section references the former Sitka Community Hospital, which closed on August 1st, 2019. And its accounting system, an accounting system is no longer required. So the proposed amendment removes the reference from the charter, and it is not expected to have any physical impacts. Staff recommends approving this ordinance and placing the question on the ballot at the regular election of October 1st.
Thank you for that introduction. Is there any public comment on ordinance 24-16?
My name is Richard Ween. My basic question is, it says that we don't have Sitka Community Hospital around anymore and the centralized accounting. So can I make the assumption as a citizen that there is zero revenue and zero everything that is going through that system, and that's why we need to remove this? Or is there some funding going through that does require accounting? And if it does, how will it be accounted? Simple.
Any other public comment on 24-16. Assembly deliberation. Tim?
I just have a question. And this is the same question for, I think, all three of these. What is the consequence of doing nothing with these at this point in time?
Melissa, well, on this one, well, actually, I will defer to Melissa. I don't think there is a consequence per se, other than it's not up to date on this specific one, but Melissa may have a further.
Yeah, on this one in particular, it's not going to hurt anything. It just makes the charter more outdated and irrelevant. So right now, that section of the charter references the school district and the Sitka Community Hospital. So for someone new coming in, it could look odd because there is no longer a separate entity out there that we would consider absorbing into our centralized accounting.
Chris, Melissa, before you, I know you tried to run away real fast.
So I know we still have liabilities regarding the community hospital. Those don't go through this accounting system. That's kind of its own.
Those
separate
are now a liability of the city. So this is referring to the hospital as a separate organization and something that operated outside of the city. And so, yes, we certainly do have fairly significant liabilities, particularly the PERS liability. And those we do actively account for, but they are now a city liability. They are not a hospital liability.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else for Melissa? Run, Melissa, run. Tim?
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we wouldn't do this, or I wasn't in support of it. I just was trying to understand if there were negative consequences to leaving it in.
I think it's important to note that at this point, the assembly is simply forwarding these to the voters. And we're not necessarily deciding on any of these items that are upcoming. Anything else from the assembly? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2024-16 on first reading, Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Celine.
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis.
Yes.
And Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item G, and that's first reading.
We're about at an hour. We only have a couple items left. Does the assembly need a recess? Let a couple people do. We'll go ahead and take a brief recess. All right, the assembly is seated, so we'll move on to item H, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2024-17 on first reading, proposing to amend section 20.01 Sitka Community Hospital Dedicated Fund of the Home Rule Charter and submitting the question of such an amendment to the qualified voters at the regular election on October 1st, 24.
Second.
That's been moved and Sarah seconded. Sarah, I understand you and Melissa had some introduction for the
Yes.
assembly.
All right, so this is the second of the proposed charter amendments, and it pertains to section 20.01, the Sitka Community Hospital Dedicated Fund. A portion of this section specifies that the fund shall be used only for the operating capital and debt service needs of the former Sitka Community Hospital. So the proposed amendment removes that reference. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our finance director to provide more detail about that.
So in reviewing charter for cleanup, one of the things that we noticed is that the language in section 20 of the charter, the way it's written, the only use for the proceeds of the tobacco tax proceeds, which are kept in the Sitka Community Hospital Dedicated Fund, are, as Sarah said, for operating expenses, debt service liabilities of the hospital. So essentially, because the hospital no longer exists between the residual, beyond the residual liabilities that we still have, we can't spend that money in any way. And so this was to, the proposed amendment is to address that. Of course, our existing liabilities are always going to come first, but each year, you know, right now that fund is still in the red. Each year it gets marginally healthier. You know, depending, my crystal ball never works, but in the next few years, 4 years, 5 years, there will probably be a surplus of funding in that fund after we meet our annual PERS commitment. So paying down that, we also have in that fund, we're tracking the payments from Search, which partially cover that PERS liability. The rest of it is covered by the tobacco tax. So if we're ever to use that right now, charter language, it makes it impossible for us to use that funding. So we still need the fund. So we've left the language in there for the fund. You know, at some point we could change the name. I think as long as we have the liabilities ongoing for the hospital, it makes sense to keep that name. The name doesn't really matter. But we need to clean the wording up. So in addition, you know, I certainly recognize that by taking that limitation off, there is also no other limitation. So what I would recommend is that the assembly consider in the next couple months putting forward an ordinance deciding what this body would potentially want to use those funds for. They were originally restricted for one purpose. The assembly can give guidance on what they'd like to do in that way when this goes to the ballot. Well, first of all, it will give the assembly confidence that there would be a proposed purpose, but also the voters will know that as well.
Sarah, anything to add? Thank you. We may call you back up for questions. Is there any public comment on ordinance 24-16?
Good afternoon. My name is Austin Cranford. I just wanted to mention, some of it was mentioned by the finance director, but under the current language of this proposal, it only strikes that it shall only be used to pay for the operating capital and debt services needs of the Sitka Community Hospital. As she mentioned, the hospital no longer exists, but liabilities exist. They're currently using Search, payment, blah, 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 all that to pay for the liabilities. The issue that is coming up is by striking this language, it allows the assembly to use this money for absolutely anything they want. It's basically combined into the general fund and they can spend it on whatever they feel like. The reason this tax was originally put in, this tax in particular, the tobacco tax, was to fund the hospital, period, point blank. That's what went to the voters. That's what was voted on. And now the hospital no longer exists. I'm not arguing against this ballot. I think it should go on the ballot only for the voters to go and vote it down and kill it. Because the tax should be used to pay off the liabilities, and then the tax should be sunsetted. Why a sunset date was not put on this tax to begin with is beyond me. And that was even mentioned. A assembly member on Sitka Chatters mentioned that it seems like the revenues from the tax are exceeding the liabilities. So the question is do we use those excess tobacco tax funds for something else? The issue that we have here as well is that it's also in the red. She just mentioned that it's still in the red. So we're giving the assembly the ability to use this money while the account is still in the red. They've refused to tell us or have not yet told us what this money will be used for. So I hope the assembly approves this proposal, and I hope the voters kill it when it comes on the ballot at the end of the year. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Richard Wayne. Unlike Mr. Orsten Cranford, I like the term nip it in the bud. And that's a gardening term where the bud comes out and you just kind of flip it off so the thing won't grow. I believe this should be voted down on for any number of reasons. One, within the ordinance, it says that the Sitka Community Hospital, it is expected there will be funded, expected. Okay, that's kind of like a not, absolutely firm word. But in the memo, it says it is likely. It's likely to rain tomorrow in Sitka, but maybe it won't. I don't think that we should be running finances on likely, even though I know in budget you're talking about, well, we expect this, and if something goes awry, then you make your change. But the thing that really sticks with me is that it says the amendment will be removing the restriction on spending from the Sitka Community Hospital Dedicated Fund, period. And so it removes that restriction when we heard from our financial director that it'll be 4 to 5 years before we get out of the red. So if you put this in context, why do it now? I'm sorry, I'm just, a nervous Nelly. You can call me Dr. Nelly. And that is, I like to make sure you have ducks in a row and make sure it's paid off and then let a future assembly handle it. Not a bad idea. There's nothing the matter with excess funds. So, please, vote this down because there's no reason to do it now. And I've never met a politician when going through a budget or whatever who found some extra money to potentially use it. The restriction on here is important. The evolution of these funds went through to pay for Sitka Community because it was losing money on a yearly basis, which was a good idea. And then it was supposed to have sunset without the hospital, and then the assembly switched it around, and now it's doing something else. And now I see a third iteration. My basic notion is to protect those funds until the liabilities are complete, because we have to pay those liabilities. And again, I expect to win the lottery, okay? And I go to bed with that notion. We don't know what the financial situation of the city is going to be in 4 or 5 years. That's a fact. So please vote this down. You can always bring it back. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Assembly deliberation? Tor?
Yeah, when this came up, it actually honestly gave me some heartburn. First of all, this went before the voters specifically for the hospital, try and save the hospital. It didn't work, but it was a nice try. And, one of the things that people accuse us of anybody in government, that once a tax gets started, you always want to keep it. And they would be right this time. To me, this should go away if we don't need it. I think it's a bit premature until we've built up a little bit of a fund and we know we've got our liabilities covered. And when it is not necessary anymore, we put it before I'm not 100% sure. I guess we would still have to put it before the voters to make it go away. And that if we wanted a tobacco tax, we should, do another ballot measure, because, there are reasons to do that. But to me, I've always hated sin taxes. I think they're bad government. And you could squint and say, well, okay, it's kind of, people are going to be using the hospital more if they're smoking and things. And so, okay, if you squint, it's an actual user group that it's benefiting. But with the hospital down, it's not true. And yeah, I've been asked many times, why do we still have this? And the answer is we've still got the PERS liability. But I really don't think we should do this. I think we should, if we're truly ready to say we don't need those funds anymore, then we just put up take away the tax. And if we want to do something else with there is a separate measure. But having it be going to the general fund in perpetuity, I think just feeds into the narrative of once we have a tax, we always have a tax. And so I get really nervous when we are playing with citizen voted taxes like that, or anything citizen voted. So I would urge us to say no to this now. And when we are confident that we have, or if we are confident that we have the funds to deal with the liability, then we just put it on to strike it. So.
Chris?
I tend to agree. I don't like the current language, or striking of language, in this ordinance. I do not want to see this go into the general fund and just get absorbed. And, but I'm also not against seeing it get dedicated towards something else by vote of the people. I'm not sure the best way of knowing how to do that. Do we come up with a separate ordinance after passing this, or do we send this back to the drawing board and have different language put into this ordinance? Yeah, this is kind of a tough one, because just knowing how this liability is going to work, it's on the PERS system. I don't fully understand the PERS. But it's something that this isn't going to go away one day. It doesn't just sunset. It slowly trickles off as retirements cease to exist. But yet the tax rate will be the same. So therefore, this account will build and build and build and get quite large by the time this sunsets as this is written. So then what do you do with that surplus? So I understand the need for a cleanup, and I think we need some sort of cleanup. I think there are a lot of different options for that thing. I definitely hear Tor and what he's saying as let this run its course, and then if you want another tobacco tax, then start from zero. But I also see a point where we could, let me just throw it out there, say any surplus could go to Parks and Rec, something good for your health. and have that somehow put into the language and throw that to the people to let them decide if that's something that they want to see or not. If they don't, then this doesn't change. It just continues to be a growing account.
That's funny. I had Parks and Rec listed as well as a potential ordinance that could dedicate some of the funds. I think it's an interesting conversation tonight because what's in front of us is one method of the voters reallocating the tax. What's been presented is another method of the voters reallocating the tax. So two different methods to get to the same point. And now, you know, is it up to us to decide on the correct? Yeah, kind of. So I think it gives me a little bit more pause on this than I had coming into the meeting, where there's a potential downvote of it once the liabilities have been fulfilled, and then a following if you want to bring it back, or this keeping it in place and then by ordinance reallocating the money. The good thing is we could allocate it by ordinance so that the voters have an idea of where that money would be going before they hit the ballot. The tricky part of that is future assemblies can change ordinance. That is a public process still, and it might be rightfully so needed to be changed. Parks and Rec does every single program they want to, and suddenly we want to fill potholes with tobacco tax money. The needs of the municipality change over time. So I think I'll vote yes tonight on this because this is one of the two methods that's in front of us. But I think it deserves some consideration of the method that goes forward. And the nice thing for me tonight is that it sounds as if we have 4 to 5 years before the liabilities will be extinguished. So we do have a slight bit of time on this one if this isn't the direction that the assembly feels that the voters would like to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This poses a bigger question for me. The question of healthcare versus like health promotion. So the Sitka Community Hospital was a healthcare provider, provided services once someone was already sick. The idea of public health is that preventative side of things. And you see more public health as a typical service of a municipality. There's not too many hospital systems out there that are owned by municipalities. It's more common in rural areas in a kind of clinic system, but not a full hospital. And it was important enough to the people that wrote our charter in 1971 to put the hospital at that kind of charter level and to address the care, health, and wellness, quality of life of our citizens in that regard. So if we're looking at kind of housekeeping and cleaning this up, then I'd like to address the name of the article. The name of the article is Sitka Community Hospital. And if that can shift to something, and I don't know the exact phrasing, something more closely aligned with public health, then I think all of these details that we're considering tonight of who gets this money and how, and if it sunsets and not, can fall into that kind of parameter and ideas of public health. If we, in this body, decide that that is something that is, you know, charter worthy and not Sitka General Code. I thank the clerk and the finance director for bringing this forward so that we can have this discussion tonight, because this is important. We don't often review articles of the charter because they're just there as the truth of how it's begun and how it is. We have this opportunity tonight, and there are 2 other meetings before the date in which something has to be solid to get on the ballot. So there is an opportunity to make some amendments to this language and have it come back for its 2 readings to get something to the people that is not necessarily just some housekeeping, but some, positive change to the charter that can have us in our kind of core duties address some significant parts of our strategic plan. Quality of life, kind of another way of saying, getting at those aspects that are non-medical factors, but then do influence health outcomes. We see that in access and quality of education, access and quality of healthcare, economic stability, neighborhood and built environment. And then social and community context. I've just read off the 5 key areas of something called social determinants of health. And so some parameters out there from the World Health Organization and CDC that kind of help communities and groups, protect and improve the health of people in their communities. And it lines up quite well with what we have here on action 1.1, 1.2, 1.5 of the quality of life in our strategic plan, being housing, transportation, access to clean air and water, healthy foods, and that physical health opportunities to fund aspects of what we kind of already do, but it's laid out in kind of disparate aspects of the municipality. Parks and Rec, funding seniors, senior transportation through the senior center, looking at, our nonprofit of 45, 50,000 a year goes to a lot of groups that offer these public health services, as well as safe housing. And the funding of our CETA group for our economic stability. So there are potentially some just shifts here, not kind of let it sunset, let it go away, but look at the term and kind of slide it to something that can continue to offer health-related services to our citizens. I've got some specific language, if that's of interest.
Tim, you haven't spoken yet.
Well, I was planning to vote this down from the get-go, mostly on the basis of it's not a problem for today, I guess, is my biggest thing. So, it's not, we're not through the liability phase on this, and as it's structured right now, it takes care of that. And so I'm just, and as listening to the conversation, I can see this is going to be a much bigger conversation about where this funding needs to go. And I think anyone who's listening was probably already plotting and planning about how to repurpose the tobacco tax right now. So, I don't think it was on the front of mind. Maybe it'll go to childcare. Maybe they'll come forward with some idea of how to, they were interested in some of the other money too. So I'm leave it alone for now. And when the problem arrives, then let's deal with it.
Kevin, Tor, then Chris.
So, yeah, thank you. This is a really good conversation. I'm really happy with it. I plan on voting no on this. And, as Tim said, this isn't anything that's super urgent. I don't want to wait too long because as money starts being available, I'd like to be able to handle it. But I agree. I really like the thought of public health, this money being dedicated to public health in some way. It's a very broad subject, but everyone brings up a lot of good points. So I can imagine we turn this down. And then another reason the Tor brought up, yeah, it leans itself to the narrative that we just, another government that just wants to suck up the money. It should be dedicated to a purpose. And because it's a tobacco tax, it should be dedicated to some sort of public health, I think. So I would envision this assembly or the next assembly, what have you, kind of look at this and maybe doing some outreach to the community, find out what people think, find out what people want, what they're interested. It's kind of exciting, actually. For me, though, the problem would be narrowing it down, but that is something that the assembly can work on in the next year or two, and then give something the voters to vote on to dedicate this to. And then that would be, of course, after a, public campaign, so people understood what they're voting on, things like that. I think that would be a really good thing for this community.
One of the things I was saying earlier, the voters should decide no matter what. And I was thinking about a way to do that, because it's going to be a point where there'll be a little bit of surplus and then there'll be more and more. So I was thinking that if we just got rid of the strike, left it the way it is, and then added a sentence, and this is just using it as an example, if these funds are no longer needed to fund the city community hospital obligations, the funds will go to, and I put down the CBS Parks and Rec program or whatever. But that way we can do that. I'm saying, I think we should vote this down tonight, but we can do something like that. And so that as it becomes available, it's already, the solution's already in place. And so it would already start being, I could see it being a trivial amount, maybe in a couple of years, and then it's starting to be, and then pretty soon it's real money. And again, what it should be, I kind of like the idea of Parks and Rec. I think it fits the idea, but I can see the argument if, for purely selfish reasons, I don't want to be having to dole it out every year like we do the fish box tax. But but again, whatever we do, we want to do it to the voters and have a specific use in mind. And I don't think we should do it by ordinance, because we get, or that tends to, things get, number one, assemblies change, and number two, we don't always have a lot of institutional memory, and we don't always remember, well, yeah, we don't remember why we did things. So anyway, sorry.
Please. I guess I have a couple of questions for Melissa, if you could help me out here. So if we do vote no tonight, or it even goes to the voters, votes no, nothing changes, how do you see this kind of happening? How many years do you see until the liability's done?
I think the original estimate was 20 years, but that was an estimate. We pay each year, I believe, the FY25 payment is around 1.5 million. So each year already, the kind of negative fund balance is getting less and less. So it's slightly improving. So it's exactly as Tor said, where it's going to be, at first there'll be a small amount, and then, that will grow. Even now with the liability pretty much, fully in effect, the search payments plus the tobacco tax, which the tobacco tax has not been growing. It's been relatively flat. But those are more than the annual liability. It's certainly something we have to keep an eye on. If all of a sudden people stop using tobacco, we would have an issue. We would have to pay some of that liability with the general fund. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this doesn't hurt anything. Not passing something now doesn't hurt anything. I just felt it was very important that that there will be this funding source. There might be a small balance even in a couple years. That because of the language in charter, it restricts it to a purpose that no longer exists, so the funding is unspendable.
Okay, and then like theoretically, as time goes on here, I mean, this account could grow and grow and grow as the PERS demand on it lessens. So in the end, if we do nothing, this could be quite a large account
Yes.
that we're gonna have to figure something out with in the future.
Yes.
Okay, that's a question for me, and then hopefully answering other people's questions.
Anything else for Melissa? JJ?
What is approximately the tobacco tax annually for us?
About 850,000.
Okay, thank you.
Last call. Thank you, Melissa. Further deliberation from the assembly this evening. Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2024-17 on first reading, Mr. Pike,
No.
Ms. Carlson,
No.
Mr. Celine,
No.
Mr. Mosier,
No.
Mr. Yestad,
No.
Mr. Christensen,
No.
Mayor Eisenbeis.
Yes.
Motion passes 1-6.
Motion fails.
Fails,
1-6.
excuse me, fails.
Brings us to item, not H, we just did that one. Item I, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2024-18 on first reading, proposing to amend section 6.02 recall of the Home Rule Charter and submitting the question of such an amendment to the qualified voters at the regular election on October 1st, 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Sarah, you have an introduction for this housekeeping as well?
I do. So this is the third and final of the proposed charter amendments, and it focuses on section 6.02, the recall, which is outdated. The proposed amendment would align the process for recall of elected public officials of the municipality with Alaska state law. So Alaska statute 29.10.200 prohibits home rule municipalities from enacting procedures related to the recall of elected public officials that are contrary to those provided in Alaska statute. So staff is recommending that you approve this ordinance and place the question on the ballot at the regular election of October 1st.
I have a question for Sarah, if I can.
Thank you. We'll go to public comment and then we can go back to
I usually am
questions.
doing informational.
Is there any public comment on ordinance 24-18?
Good afternoon. My name is Austin Cranford. I am actually greatly pleased to see this here. Back in December 19th of 2023, I actually had a meeting with Mr. Hanson and the city clerk because I was in the process of doing 2 other petitions, and a recall petition was actually going to be a part of my agenda when I went. And that's when we found out that the city was actually in non-compliance with state law. Basically, the way it worked out is the city could only be recalled for 3 things, but the state allows recall for 4, specifically 1, lack of fitness, 2, incompetence, 3, neglect of duties, and 4, corruption. Which would mean members of this body would actually be recallable for more things than they were prior to this being approved. And it was actually getting to the point because remember I mentioned December 19th that this was brought up, and I was informed that I would be made aware of when the recall would be fixed because I had questions regarding it. That information was never made available to me. So actually, March 22nd of this year, I reached out to the Alaska Department of Law Criminal Division and spoke with Angie D. Kemp, and they were actively looking into why this law was in violation of Alaska state law. So I'm sure the Alaska Department of Law Criminal Division would be more than enthused to see this pass as well. So I hope the city approves this, and I look forward to it being approved on the ballot by the people. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. This has to do with coming into compliance with Alaska state statute. Now, when you actually look at AS 29.10.200, it has quite a large list of things that can or can't be done. And so I believe the recall portion is approximately 29.26.40 through 60. I have to correct it. It could be, no, I think it's 40. And I read through it, and there's nothing unusual in it. But this is a technical notion, and that is when you put these things forward and they're going to go to a vote, please put in the statute you are recommending, and it's available on any number of websites, including the state website. You can go to Justia or any of the other legal. So in the packet, people can see the differences, and also print the, in the packet, print the, what the code is per se. You have it here, but it's, people need side by side. And so from a technical point of view, when you're saying it doesn't make state statute, all you are is giving a number. And as a citizen, when I see a number which begins with AS, Alaska statute, it tells me that you, quite honestly, don't want me to know or take the effort to see what this is all about. It is within your prerogative to have a complete memo, to educate citizens, which will eventually, hopefully, educate the public for the ballot proposition. So this seems like something reasonable, but from a technical point of view, the memo needs to be more complete. So anybody want to raise a pinky or something to say who wrote it?
Is there any other public comment? Assembly deliberation? Tor?
That was my question. Can you lay out the state statutes as you understand them?
Yes, and I wrote the memo, so I apologize for not putting that information in there. I'm happy to redo that for second reading if this passes on first reading. I do have Title 29, the recall process in front of me. Our home rule charter states that any 5 qualified municipal voters may file an application. State statute says at least 10. Our charter says that the petition shall be signed by a number of qualified municipal voters equal to at least 20% of the voters, and state statute states 25%. The charter states for the election that there shall be an election on a recall petition within 40 days. State statute says otherwise, or states otherwise. It says if a regular election occurs within 75 days, but not sooner than 45 days after submission of the petition to the governing body shall submit the recall of that election. If no regular election occurs within 75 days, the governing body shall hold a special election on the recall question within 75 days, but not sooner than 45 days after a petition is submitted to the governing body. If a vacancy occurs in the office after a sufficient recall petition is filed with the clerk, the recall question may not be submitted to the voters. The governing body may not appoint to the same office an official who resigns after a sufficient recall petition is filed naming that official. So those are the major discrepancies that I found upon my review.
Tor, anything else?
No, that's what the question I was going to answer.
I really don't care the difference. The fact of the matter is we're out of compliance. This gets us into compliance. Who cares? It's housekeeping. Let's move on.
Kevin?
I'm just gonna say thanks to Sarah and your team for putting this forth, getting things in alignment. I'm very pleased, and So you forgot to put the other one in there. You can put it in next week.
I'm happy to include it in the next one.
Thank you. You were
Yes.
much appreciated.
Any other deliberation on item I? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2024-18 on first reading, Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes, and if we could turn off our mics when we're not actively speaking, it'll get rid of that hum. Thank you.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Mr. Celine.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on first reading for item I.
Thank you. That'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes.
I'm Larry Edwards. I'm here regarding the item that was on tonight on the action plan for tourism. And I'm here to ask that action items 1, 2, and 3 be removed from the action plan. Some context will explain why. Sitka's still standing long-range tourism plan is Visitor Industry Plan 2.0, adopted by the Assembly at the behest of the business community in 2007. The plan's objective for the magnitude of tourism is in part, quote, Sitka wants a strong, healthy tourism sector, but not at the expense of the quality of the community as a place to live. And quote, growth is welcome that brings more more benefits, more spending, jobs, business opportunities without significant impacts on resident quality of life. The task force's recommendations like flatten the curve and take out the peak are insufficient. They will not restore the quality of life that has been unjustly taken from Sitka residents. The Sitka Sentinel reported cruise industry portmaster Fred Reeder as saying 2 years after the plan was adopted that he didn't think Sitkans want upwards of 300,000 cruise visitors. And then there is this background, which is statements excerpted from a fall meeting of last year and a 2021 radio story.
You know, when they made this big decision for Sitka, I found out in 1 week, if even that, before they made their public relations statement on this giant cruise boom that was going to happen here. We were not involved in any of it. It was not a, hey, we're thinking about this. Can you handle this? What are you guys' concerns? Royal Caribbean and McGraw came walking into our office and said, hey, we're going to release this next week. And the mayor and I just stood there with our mouths wide open and giant eyes. And what do we do now?
Chris McGraw runs the Sitka Sound Cruise Terminal. He said that Royal Caribbean was adding 3 ships to its Southeast Alaska itinerary.
2 of those ships will be their Quantum class ships, which have passenger capacities in excess of 4,000 passengers.
That could push Sitka's cruise visitor count in 2022 to over 400,000. He wants the rest of Sitka to be ready.
Looking forward to 2022, I think Sitka really needs to start planning now to adequately accommodate from both a local perspective and visitor perspective these passenger volumes.
McGraw said that there could be over 40 days in the summer of 2022 with over 5,000 cruise passengers in town. He noted that Sitka's downtown Lincoln Street corridor feels crowded when there are only 1,500 passengers in town.
And the sidewalks.
Thank you. I
the
appreciate your
traffic,
time
that
this
all
evening.
needs to be improved,
Thank you,
in my
sir. I
opinion.
appreciate your time this evening.
Everyone should be able to enjoy themselves and live in.
Mayor and Assembly members, my name is Robert Hattel. I want to comment on 2 things. First of all, Assemblywoman Carlson, I want to thank you for bringing up the World Health Organization healthy community determinants. As a retired hospital healthcare provider and also healthcare administrator, I think that's very important language. Parks and Recreation is a part of that. but there's a much larger picture, and I'd like to see that the assembly know that language. So I hope that you hold that as part of the memory that needs to go forward. So thank you for bringing that forward. I would like to go back to the tourist issue. What I heard, I appreciate that there was a lot of effort put into the task force. There was a lot of input from our community. There are parts of it that are going to be it already is very divisive as we go forward, but it's a really important part of where our community is going. So it's financially, it will sustain us as a community, but it also can greatly impact the quality of life that we all have come here and live here, or either raised here or come to live here for a reason. Mr. Leach, I want to thank you and your staff. One of the things that I kept hearing is capacity and trying to pull off that. What I didn't hear lifted up, I would assume when you're looking at capacity, two of the biggest things that should be the highest priority is establishing the Tourist Commission. You need to really make that organization or that committee working and ongoing and continuing the task of the task force. The other part is having the tourist coordinator, director, or whatever. I appreciate Mr. Leach's direction, but as already noted, that document's going to be, there's a lot to keep up in the air and keeping it focused. That's going to really take someone directing it. I really think that you need to find funding for that and appointing, getting in a director to follow through on that. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, both by the Assembly, by the community, and by the task force. I think we can continue to have the wonderful community that we have if we work together on this. Thank you.
Peter Hagan, Small Town Soul, pro-tourist, pro-control. The Tourism Task Force's #1 job to this assembly was to help find a good number of visitors. They passed the buck. Not even a limit or range that could be adjusted. The business members on task force do not want limits. I understand, nobody wants limits. But this assembly owes it to Sitka, its population, and its temporary visitors to keep them from becoming collateral damage. There's been mention of safety with regards to bikes, kids, buses, schools, all along the highway. Nobody has mentioned health and well-being. That goes right with it. Cruiser groups leave the cruise dock walking to town. I would imagine cruise line business model would say, we need more buses. Also, with regard to not being able to control anybody on private property, don't those buses dump all their passengers at a city building, use the Centennial building, they use neighborhoods, and I see them going down Lincoln, Jeff Davis, Catlin Street. They're being used and impacted. I want to say something about it. Noise and exhaust and congestion, no matter how you spread them out, do damage to behavior and well-being and health. 10 hours of zooming buses outside is fatiguing and nauseating. Mailboxes on HBR are black covered. That's not dirt. On April 4, 2024, a small town soul group had a rally at the roundabout. We received a response from thumbs up, single finger waves, cussing, even some donations and new members. But one soul member recorded the travel of the cruise buses through the roundabout for an 8-hour period, the bus number and the time. 240 buses through the roundabout. One boat in, the Bliss. It's here every Monday recently. The diesel buses bring industrial feel to downtown. Sitka needs reduction, not spread. We are still a two-lane town. It's all connected. You can't fit in a size 14
Thank you. I
in a
appreciate
size
your
7.
comments this evening.
I,
Thank
for
you.
one, will
Thank you.
not
In
drink
fairness to everybody,
the
in
cruise
fairness
line
to everybody, we're
Kool-Aid.
going to ask you to stop at your 3 minutes. Appreciate your time this evening.
Anyone else for persons to be heard?
Good evening, Austin Cranford. I just wanted to make a few comments about comments and actions that happened during the assembly meeting. During the Action Plan of Tourism Task Force recommendation at 1910, there was a hot mic on the assembly side referring to a lose-lose comment. I would like to know what specifically was the lose-lose scenario when that comment was made. Regarding the body camera footage, I'm glad that it was approved by the assembly. If anybody's ever read satires by Juvenal, a Roman poet, he was the one famous for saying, "Who watches the watchman?" Those cameras will allow us to make sure that the city, the police, and even the citizens are doing what they're supposed to be doing. But I am glad that the lieutenant brought up what type of cameras are being used. This should have been put in the memo. The AI that was mentioned already has a civil rights and privacy concern complaint against it by the American Civil Liberties Union. But maybe we can, not worry about the AI. Maybe we can get it without the AI. It also has an optional mute. I would like us to have the cameras that don't have the ability for officers to just mute their recordings. That seems to defeat the purpose of the recording. And then there's a 2-minute buffer where it will record constantly, but when you press the button, it'll record from that button press onward, but it'll also go back 2 minutes and archive that footage. So that's good, but we should make sure we know what we're getting when we purchase these cameras. And then at 2059, during the comment regarding the Sitka Community Hospital Dedication Fund, it's in the charter to keep the assembly away. As mentioned by the mayor, ordinances can change depending on who's on the assembly, what the assembly wants to do. The charter can only be changed by the people. It was put in the charter so that the assembly could not touch those funds. But we sat here and heard from the assembly that, well, maybe it can go to Parks and Rec, or maybe it can go to Health and Human Services. That's fine, as long as the voters approve it. The assembly has no authority of where those funds go. And if the citizens decide that they want that money to sit in that fund and forever gain interest, then that's where that money will stay. Thank you.
I'll ask you to start again. I need to queue up my computer. Here we go.
Is there a problem?
I needed to, I didn't start speaking and I needed to queue up my computer, that's all. And I saw the time running. So
Okay.
I
You
asked
can
for it to
direct
be
requests through
reset.
me. Thank you.
And
You can direct requests through me.
I
Thank you.
directed it in general.
Okay.
So anyway, good evening. My name is Richard Wien. And I just wanted to say that the biggest need in Sitka, though we all love Parks and Rec, if we have needs, I think that the citizens need to weigh in on it. Certainly the number one need was childcare. And that could be a very healthy funding for something that, many people can utilize. But it has to be more diverse because there are multiple need groups within this community. So all of these individuals need to be considered. One of the important things that was mentioned is that we need the expertise of the industry to tell us how to deal with things. Well, let me tell you something. The e-bike people had their opportunity to set the standard for the city when they set up their group. And so what we actually saw was what the e-bike group wanted to do. So we allowed them the opportunity to do that. And if it wasn't for public pushback, I don't think there would even be a conversation, because as far as that goes, it'll be the lowest possible standard. So I think there needs to be industry oversight, because I think it is apparent. And the same thing is true for buses. If there was not pushback, I do not believe that the buses would have been switched back or pushed back to get newer buses, because that represented a deal breaker for the town. So I think it's very important to have critical thinking when we deal with this. And I'm a little disappointed at the conversation here tonight with the task force. You can call me, good cop, bad cop. I'm the bad cop. The bottom line is that the assembly was given the task force things on April 30th. There has been a lot of time, probably a month or more, to review the action plan. And it was tonight, the conversation was almost like a first date. We didn't even get over the initial conversation. I just don't understand it. Plus, there was the other notion, is that I had the feeling at the last time this was brought up and canceled that there would be public input on the task force. And here's another kick the can down the road, that there is no opportunity for the public to weigh in, even those who sat here through the entire time. The bottom line is that, if you don't have enough time, resign. I mean, this is a very important issue for town, and now we're down to 26-27 season because the notion has been kicked.
Anyone else under persons to be heard this evening? I see none. That'll bring us to reports. Over the last 2 days, I had an opportunity to meet with public relations people from Norwegian and Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. It was oddly that they were within the same week, Monday and Tuesday, today actually, but just a mid-season check-in type deal. Learned nothing groundbreaking, passed nothing groundbreaking. Just kind of a check-in to see how today was going and make sure that they knew we knew that they were available, and they knew that we were available. So that's all I have to pass from those meetings. John?
Thanks, Mayor. We had a visit from one of Senator Murkowski's DC staff July 1st of last week. There were some discussions as the CDS requests were moving forward. One of them we submitted for the new police department and jail gained some interest that we weren't really expecting, but the match was something like 70 or 80%. So there's a lot of steps that we need to get, a lot of hurdles we have to get over before we're really ready to take on that project. But during the staffers' visit, we were able to get a tour. Lieutenant's not here, but the lieutenant walked us around. They get to see the uniqueness of sharing the building with the state and some various offices in there. We talked about some of the challenging conditions in the jail, and how it hasn't. A lot of things have been piecemealed, especially with the HVAC systems not the best. So it was a good visit. They were able to see firsthand some of the things we're trying to get rectified over there. So more to come on that one.
Attorney reports. Michael, do you have anything for us?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. No comments at this time, except an interesting meeting, very informative on a lot of issues. So thank you. And thank you, Assembly, Mayor, Clerk, and everyone else. And I think that Sarah did a great job on preparing the ballot initiatives with the help of Melissa. And it's up to you guys to decide what to do with them, and you did appropriately. And there's just a lot of, issues going on and, keep rolling forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Liaison representatives. Sarah, clerk's report.
All right, so we have our long list of vacancies on our boards and commissions. The Animal Hearing Board, Health Needs and Human Services Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, Investment Committee, Local Emergency Planning Committee, Police and Fire Commission, and the Sustainability Commission. So if folks are interested, they can stop by our office. Jess will give them all the details in an application, and we'll put their application forward at a future meeting. The clerk's office is gearing up for the municipal election. The first day to file for a candidate, or first day to file candidate petitions is Monday, July 15th. And then the final day is Friday, August 2nd at 5 p.m. This year in the election, we have a number of seats to be filled, a mayoral seat, 2 assembly member seats, and 2 school board seats. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other reports this evening? Seeing none, that would bring us to adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. We are adjourned.